impacts are. It's basically we feel the entire citizenry should be told as soon as possible how the budget will actually impact them the coming year.
Now, would you like to say or to just give us a highlight of some of the expectations that you think Azika will be contained in this year's budget? Not to mention that we believe that this has been an all-inclusive process in the sense that government always calls out for submissions from stakeholders, and I want to believe that Zika must have been one of those.
That's correct. There are two things: what I expect to see and what I would like to see. What I would like to see and what I think a lot of people would like to see are measures to, arrest the growing budget deficit, measures to ensure that we don't get to a level of acute debt distress, measures to ensure that government is able to collect more revenue, broaden the tax base, so that you and me, the taxpayer, we've got about 17 million people in Zambia, and only about 800,000 are in formal employment, which is about 4.7%, less than 5%. So the burden on you and me and all those in formal employment is quite great. We'd like to see some measures that would broaden tax base, bring in more other institutions, other individuals into the tax base. That's what we'd like to see.
Mr. Kazilemani, I would just say that these expectations or what you would like to see, I think the best thing is we wait until the budget is presented and then we can have a discussion on that, because everybody's saying that the burden is too high on the tax paying citizens, be it pay as you earn income tax or excess duty or VAT. So I think your views on broadening the tax base are coming at the right time. But just now I want to take you back to the organization, which is they can just tell us what kind of programs that you have introduced.
Well, we've got two premier qualifications. The Chartered Accountant Zambia is a premier qualification. It's an internationally recognized professional accounting qualification. In fact, we do have students across the borders actually studying for this. We also have other qualifications like the diploma in taxation, the diploma in public sector financial management, and also a certificate in taxation. So we've been increasing the number of programs that are available for the market, and that's our own contribution to ensure that we produce high quality accountants, ethical accountants that will be able to help the nation ensure that there's proper financial management in both the public and the private sectors.
Okay, and these qualifications that the programs that you've introduced as Zika, how are they doing on the international scene?
They're doing pretty well. We already have some students in Zimbabwe studying the Chartered Accountant Zambia qualification. We've already had some graduates as well, apart from Zimbabwe, from the likes of Nigeria, Kenya, Tanzania, India, and so on. So it has been accepted by the market, and even locally on the local Zambian market, based on our interaction with various employers and stakeholders, they're pretty happy with the quality of the qualification.
Well, not to hold you here because it's quite hot, and we want to give you time to go and digest the presentation and then later on have an interview with you. We're told that you have planned some post-budget analysis with EAZ. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, that's correct. Every year, and this is one of the highlights of the year, we have a post-budget dinner in the evening after the Minister of Finance has presented the budget. So we are having it this evening, and this year for the first time we are partnering with the Economic Association of Zambia. It's going to be held at a Hotel Intercontinental, scheduled to start around 18:30. And we expect the Minister to be there. We expect various policymakers or influencers to be there, the likes of the Ministry of Finance officials, Zambia Revenue Authority, and other stakeholders like EAZ, Zaki, Chamber of Mines, and so on and so forth. It's going to be a very robust discussion, and we would like members to come out in full force and actually take on the Minister and other relevant people to explain why they're introducing this measure or that measure, what the impact of this or that will be on everyone.
And admission is restricted, or is it free, or do you have to pay some fee to attend this post-budget dinner?
It's a token fee. I believe the Secretariat has all the details. It has already been advertised, I believe. So there's a small fee, but it's definitely not prohibitive.
Mr. Kazilemani, I so look forward to seeing you after this budget presentation so that we can have a deeper conversation on what you want to see in the budget.
Likewise, thank you.
That's the sponsor for this live broadcast, Zambia Institute of Chartered Accountants, and I was speaking to the president, Mr. Jason Kazilemani. Right, thank you so much, Inuto. An interview there with Zika President, Mr. Jason Kazilemani. We do know that Zika have always come to the table in terms of sponsoring the live broadcast of the 2019 national budget. And just towards the end of the interview there, he did indicate that later on tonight there will be a post-budget analysis dinner that will be taking place at the Intercontinental Hotel tonight. Just now, we take a break and we take in a message from our sponsors.
Whether you're laying down foundations for your business or restructuring market goals, it's important to have professionals that you can trust. Chartered accountants are key to business growth to help you bring your ventures to the world. That's why you should make sure you have a CA Zambia on board. CA Zambia is a globally recognized chartered accountancy qualification that ensures our chartered accountants uphold international standards and stay informed on the best accounting practices worldwide. Keep your business growth healthy. Go with a CA Zambia certified accountant. CA Zambia, developing business leaders. Are you a talented student thinking of a career in accountancy? Do you desire to develop a successful and internationally recognized qualification? CA Zambia will help you achieve your career aspirations. Make the right choice and shape your career in business and finance. CA Zambia, not just an accountant, but a chartered accountant. CA Zambia, developing business leaders.
One Zambia, one nation.
All right, we are coming to you live from Parliament buildings, and as we keep emphasizing, there is high expectations of what the 2019 national budget will have to offer. Earlier on, we did hear from different media institutions the interests from various stakeholders as well as the general citizenry on the emphasis that they would like to see in the 2019 national budget. Of course, issues to do with emphasis with regards to manufacturing sector, the agriculture sector. These need to be addressed. They need to be given immediate attention as core drivers of the economy. But obviously, there are different thoughts and feelings coming in from the general citizenry on where they would want to have the emphasis and focus as relates to how the 2019 fiscal year will pan out. Absolutely, Chitalu. Absolutely, Chitalu, and we are joined obviously for these expectations rather and analysis of the budget after the minister presents. But just now what we're doing is just speculating on what the 2019 budget will be containing. And to help us do that, we have Dr. Bonachita, who is a lecturer at University of Zambia. Good afternoon and welcome.
Hi, Into, and hi, Chitalu.
So expectations are quite high among the ordinary citizens and other stakeholders. The cry of most Zambians, especially the ordinary ones, that the budget seems to be actually carried by the ordinary Zambian in terms of taxation system. It's too heavy in terms of pay as you earn, VAT, excise duty, customs duty, and so on. And for a long time, the cry has been that, let's broaden the tax base. Let's ensure that many companies that are in Zambia pay their fair share of tax and in turn finance the national budget. But what are your expectations? What would you say this presentation today by the Minister will address?
Thank you, Inut, and you brought up very salient, immediate points. I'm sure you followed the debate in the last couple of days, and I'm sure you've hit the nail on the head, as one would say. Because listening to different cross-sections of society, but particularly the most important to the Zambian people, ordinary person, it was interesting for me as they raised the very issue touched on taxation. And I think this is important because it's underlying the fact that it's not necessarily the person only in formal employment feeling the burden of the tax. We have direct taxes, we have indirect taxes, so everybody pays tax one form or the other. Whether you're buying a loaf of bread, cooking, oil, carpenter, you are paying tax, as much as we know that the people in formal employment have the taxes on their salaries and wages. It points to one thing, that we are facing an uncertain economic environment at the moment, and also the very fact that there is this incidence of burden on taxation that is being felt by almost everybody unanimously, that government expenditure, both government expenditure and government revenue are constrained. Until we broaden the tax base to capture those that perhaps on the commercial side are not being captured in, because with indirect tax you capture all households, virtually everybody. Even the kids that are buying balloons and sweets are paying tax. There's value-added tax on that. So we therefore looking towards certainty and stability first of all, and hopefully after that can look towards economic growth. It would be too presumptuous to assume that we can immediately focus on attaining the desirable economic growth while the economy is turbulent. And I think people are not too expectant that way, but what they want most is predictability and a sense of security as far as their financial situation goes at the household individual level. And I think that's what the Minister of Finance task this afternoon and beyond is to try and portray to us that there is confidence coming back into the economy, and that is a foundation towards the growth that we are looking for, because certainly there is turbulence right now. The turbulence is coming from partly the debt overhang and expenditure, as I've explained.
All right. It's very interesting that you mention confidence as one of the key factors that the Minister of Finance will be endeavoring to portray in her presentation this afternoon here at Parliament. Given what has been happening in terms of the debt issue, where most citizens are actually thinking that probably we need to slow down on contraction of debt, and also the fact that there has been some happenings in terms of grants that bilateral and multilateral agencies have been extending. And I do know that these, in any given year on the budget, are usually reflected on the budget presentation by the Minister. Do you think that there's more pressure now to actually mobilize resources domestically?
Again, absolutely right. We've essentially overextended our external sources anyway in terms of resource mobilization. Of course, we can try to rely on the goodwill of donors and grants, but other than that, in terms of commercial sources and other related sources, we clearly do not have the capacity to engage in further mobilization of resources that way, borrowing. But again, as we've just noted, and the point you raised, the burden of taxation in Zambia is being felt and quite significantly. However, that is not to suggest that there may not be alternative sources, but those alternative sources unfortunately have to come out of some investment in the productive sector and the social sector. Can we accomplish that in 1 year? To some extent, which is why I was saying I think for me I would like to see indications of stability as a commitment towards growth by the Ministry of Finance in today's budget. So in short, yes, we're going to have to go through some hard times before they get better. And but that message should be given in a way that is founded on hope and confidence by the population.
All right, Dr. Chita, we actually appreciate the fact that you've taken time off your busy schedule to just help us digest and understand the intricacies that will be presented this afternoon. As always, most people say that the devil is in the detail.
Exactly.
So we're extremely happy that you have taken time to come and just educate us and pay attention to the details in that presentation this afternoon. But just now, we give your viewers a profile on Margaret Mwanakatwe, who is Minister of Finance, who we're expecting to walk up the stairs into the chamber in Parliament and present the national budget at about 14:30 or thereabouts. Here is her profile.
Born on the 1st of November 1961, Margaret Mwanakatwe is Zambia's finance minister. She is a businesswoman, accountant, and bank executive. Having served in various portfolios in the banking sector across Africa, Margaret is a bona fide banker. In 2015, Margaret was nominated Member of Parliament and appointed Minister of Commerce by President Edgar Lungu. February 4th, 2018 saw a cabinet reshuffle. It was the one that would see her appointed Minister of Finance. Mwanakatwe's extensive experience in banking provides an advantage for her to add value to the ministry. Like those who held the position before her, all eyes will be on Mrs. Mwanakatwe and the copper briefcase as the nation gears up to hear what is in store for the 2019 budget. The contents can only be revealed by her. Stay tuned to the presentation of the 2019 national budget.
That's the profile of the lady that is making history this afternoon as the second in the history of the country to present the national budget as a female. It is exactly 20 years ago today, which is 1998, when we had the first female Minister of Finance in the name of Edith Nawakwi take the historic steps to Parliament. And today we witness yet again a historic moment. 20 years after that, we have Margaret Mwanakatwe, and we hope that you have learnt one or two things in that profile. Just now, we cross over to my colleague Chitalu Mulenga, who's going to be interviewing the Bankers Association of Zambia CEO. Chitalu.
Right, thank you, Inato. Just now I'm joined by Mr. Leonard Mwanza. He is the CEO for the Bankers Association of Zambia. Mr. Mwanza, perhaps just to get from you first and foremost, as the Bankers Association of Zambia, what are your expectations with regards to the 2019 national budget?
Well, we do have a lot of expectation here in the 2019 budget. As you know, I think we are going through a bit of challenges in the economy, so we're hoping that the minister will try and touch on those issues that will help to stimulate the private sector, whilst at the same time trying to protect the social sector spending in the budget.
So, what other areas of focus come to mind very quickly when you think about perhaps what it is that will be tabled here this afternoon?
So I think we can take two key things. The first one is we'd like to see the minister addressing the debt issues. I think we have serious issues regarding the current position of our debt, our ability to settle and things like that. And I think if you look at it from a much more critical perspective and look at it from the banking sector perspective, we are also affected from that perspective in the sense that the country is still holding on to some money that is owed to a few contractors that have supplied money to government. So we would like to see how the 13.9 billion will be unlocked in the 2019 budget. We would like to see more openness in terms of where we are with our debt position. We would like to see a bit more clarity in terms of where we are with the IMF discussion, because I think it's important that we restart the relationship so that we see where we can see the economy move forward.
Now, there were a number of consultative meetings held in relation to inputting into the budget, and the various stakeholders did participate. The Bankers Association, did you make any specific contribution?
Yes, we did participate, and it was in line with unlocking some cash flows that is held with these people that have supplies goods and services at the point of withholding tax. I think our submission was that they should allow these suppliers and contractors to claim for their VAT refunds even before the agents who could have withheld the tax has limited those funds to ZRI, or in the interest of unlocking the liquidity, trying to give them some breath, trying to give them some opportunity to grow their businesses. So we hope that our submission has been taken into account so that as agents, banks inclusive, withhold that tax, the supplier should not be disadvantaged in terms of claiming back that VAT. We hope that our submission has been considered in this budget.
So obviously you will be looking out for that one. Now, this particular budget comes against the backdrop of austerity measures that the government has announced, and taking that into account, what kind of fiscal year do you foresee?
So we'd like to see a bit more tightness on the fiscal consolidation space. And one of the key things that the government needs to do, the minister needs to do, is to ensure that the recently announced austerity measures are put into a practical perspective. I think we've had very good pronouncement in terms of the austerity measures. We'd like to see the practical implementation of those measures in the 2019 budget, because without doing that, I think we'll be losing it out, because we do have quite serious challenges in terms of our capacity to settle our debt, our capacity to pay our debt. I think it's all contaminated in the position of how much are we giving to the debt position and how much are we giving to the social sector position. So I think she needs to make sure that the austerity measures are put in place in a more effective way, so that as we move forward, the social sector side of the budget should not be unduly affected.
And finally, Mr. Mwanza, as an association, how much do you follow up, once the budget is unveiled, in terms of, its implementation and also, as a way of just ensuring that, what has been allocated to the various sectors goes to the various sectors? Do you take a keen interest?
Yes, we do take a keen interest in terms of knowing how much the government has raised, how much they've spent. And I think we do this through our normal consultative engagement with the Minister of Finance. We do have quarterly meetings where we sit down and the Minister do provide with us the information in terms of where they are in terms of their spending, where they are in terms of their revenue. And also, we always are interested in looking at where is the economy going in terms of the key macroeconomic fundamentals. As you know, banking is at the center of economic enhancement. We are the oil that wheels the economy. We support all the key sectors of the economy. So we are more interested in ensuring that the government at least gives stimulus to the private sector, so that the private sector, as it grows, we can start seeing meaningful jobs being created by the private sector. We can start seeing the private sector raising the necessary revenue that they should give to the government. So as a sector, we are there to make sure that we provide platforms for collection of this revenue, which we are doing through the e-tax platforms, and to make sure that there's consistency in the manner of implementation of the budget. So we are very keen stakeholders, because when the economy is doing well and all the fundamentals are good, I think the banking sector also flourishes.
Well, Mr. Mwanza, I'd like to thank you so much. I do know that after the budget is unveiled and we continue engaging stakeholders, we will get to hear your thoughts in terms of reactions to the budget.
We hope it to be a stimulus budget that will help to unlock the private sector growth.
Thank you so much. Well, I have been speaking with Bankers Association CEO, Mr. Leonard Mwanza. Inetu?
Thank you very much, Talu. And one key word that's coming across so often already before the minister even presents the budget is consistency and confidence in the economy. And just now we take a break to allow a word from our sponsors.
Expect government to bring in a bit more sanity, especially when it comes to VAT refunds. I think we need to come up with measures to ensure that the figures or the amount of VAT that is being refunded reflect the true cost of raw materials that are being purchased by people that are claiming the VAT refunds. We also need to ensure that the supply chain of mineral resources that are being mined there's transparency there, so that government is able to get the correct taxes from there. We also want there to be transparency to ensure that mining companies actually bring in the forex into the country. That is also going to help going forward to maintain the value of the Zambian kwacha. In terms of the agriculture sector, we expect government to look at ways on how the e-voucher system might be more of a revolving fund to also reduce ghost farmers, to remove ghost farmers from the program, and also to ensure that people that benefit, those that really need the help, and also to win off people that probably are unable to graduate from the program or are not the intended target. We also expect to hear measures on how government is going to provide roads, feeder roads to farming areas, to also continue in putting more land on the under irrigation as announced in last year's budget. Social cash transfer, we expect government to announce measures to ensure that the monies reach the intended people, and also to expand over the same, and to see how a government can come up with not only the giving of money to recipients, but also to come up with empowerment programs to ensure that people don't get the money for free, but they actually work for it. Coming to the energy sector, we expect government to announce measures to ensure that projects are funded that are going to increase energy supply. I think even in the budget, we need to see preliminary budgets to fund the proposed nuclear science and technology programs that in future can give us energy from uranium. We need to start seeing all those things being funded. We are very happy and are eager to see if there will be funding for the Center for Nuclear Science and Technology that is going to help the Zambian government and even the country as a whole to provide better health care for cancer patients, for example, enhance medical tourism. We also want to see agriculture sector diversified, and we support exports of goods to markets that are unreachable now using the multi-purpose irradiation center that government plans to operate there. We also want to see funding to science and technology in general, and also to see how much money is going to be allocated by the Zambian government towards student bursaries through the new proposed system. It's this revolving fund. I think we expect to see focus of other universities, other government colleges put on a bursary scheme so that it operates more like a private project, but within government, like a commercial project within government setup. We also expect government to make pronouncements in terms of infrastructure development. We want, I know austerity measures have been announced to put on hold certain projects, but we expect projects that are currently going on to be funded by the Zambian government, because if the government reduces funding to such projects, they're basically reducing economic activity in the country. We expect on the macroeconomic levels a reduced fiscal burden on the working class, to stimulate savings, and then the savings that can be converted into investments. We expect, I'm sure it's too late now, but an idea such that certain projects that government is building and are yet to be commissioned using debt finance, if they are not very strategic for the economy, to be advertised for PPP, so that costs can be borne by the private party. For example, I know there are some hydropower stations that are being built, and those government should see ways of not moving those projects on government balance sheet. Maybe we can talk to cooperating partners so that they can pick up those projects, own them for a certain period of time to recoup the cost, that the monies that are going to pump into the projects, make some profits before finally returning those projects to government. That way we are going to avoid new debt coming on the government balance sheet. I think that is such a measure that everybody should support, especially in projects that are not of strategic nature to the nation.
One Zambia, one nation.
Well, we are at Parliament grounds, where we expect the Minister of Finance, Margaret Mwanakatwe, to be walking up the historic staircase there leading to the chamber at Parliament. And we are joined, of course, by the experts for today, who is Dr. Bona Chita, and he's a lecturer at UNZA. And just before we actually went to the interview with the Economic Association of Zambia president, we had announced that we would be breaking for a commercial to allow our sponsor to sell themselves. So before we get back to Dr. Chita, probably we can get that message from our sponsor.
One nation.
Whether you're laying down foundations for your business or restructuring market goals, it's important to have professionals that you can trust. Chartered accountants are key to business growth, to help you bring your ventures to the world. That's why you should make sure you have a CA Zambia on board. CA Zambia is a globally recognized chartered accountancy qualification that ensures our chartered accountants uphold international standards and stay informed on the best accounting practices worldwide. Keep your business growth healthy. Go with a CA Zambia certified accountant. CA Zambia, developing business leaders. Are you a talented student thinking of a career in accountancy? Do you desire to develop a successful and internationally recognized qualification? CA Zambia will help you achieve your career aspirations. Make the right choice and shape your career in business and finance. CA Zambia, not just an accountant, but a chartered accountant. CA Zambia, developing business leaders.
One Zambia, one nation.
Parliament grounds. Dr. Chita, just before we broke for commercials and a bit of VTRs in terms of recordings from the Economic Association of Zambia, you were saying how important it is that the minister this afternoon portrays confidence and instills confidence in the macroeconomic situation in the country. But also, I wanted you to talk to us a little bit more about external factors in terms of, we have seen in the last 3 days reports coming from the United States that the American Reserve Bank there has increased, or the interest rates have risen. So that puts a bit of pressure on the Zambian kwacha, isn't it?
Yeah, to a certain extent, because if we take the situation of the mines, for example, and we know in terms of the international transmission mechanism of the dollar, the rest of the world economy. So we are exposed through the financing arrangements of such firms. And not only that, we have an issue of interest rates ourselves, which is worrying because of what's happening to the deficit and also to the debt situation. The debt situation which is spiraling the deficit. But as we have borrowed significantly, and once those interest rates go up and they start to go up, we are exposed for obvious reasons. So there is great and serious cause for concern because of our exposure in terms of the external situation. And in addition, we look at what's happening in terms of the US-China relations. Just an example, China is our biggest buyer, the largest buyer of copper. And when that environment starts to affect China's economic growth, there may be some consequences. It may be insignificant, it may not. So both our exports and both our debt exposure become exposed to what's happening on the international in the international economy. It's a little economy, and from that point of view, some people would argue that, well, our exposure is limited because our economy is not that big anyway. But that's an issue for debate. The fact that there will be some exposure directly through interest rates is not really a point for argument. It's obvious. So yeah, we need to take external factors into account, certainly. And I had wanted us to come to discuss a little on the sector performance, but we can take that later.
Let's go back to the sector performance.
Having discussed the external effects on the economy, I think we still then need to discuss how different sectors may be impacted. The most obvious one is the debt servicing Ministry of Finance, but we're worrying about what will happen to the real sector. You mentioned manufacturing earlier on, but for me, probably more importantly is the agriculture sector. The reason being our economic growth has been agriculture sector led. So on the real side of the economy, there are those the industry and commercial side, those concerned. How is the minister going to address efforts to stabilize? Again, it's uncertain. We've seen the last 2 seasons that farming inputs and the extent of farmers support support program have come under criticism in some quarters. And the distribution effort of inputs has also impacted on farmers' productivity. And that has slowed down agriculture just at the time that we're looking for growth. Related to that is expenditure on the social sector. We want to ensure, look at what happened this year. We had a tremendous amount of our budget share go towards cholera, as an example, because Ministry of Health was not as prepared as the citizens would have liked it to be, and containing cholera took longer and used more resources than we had hoped for. We hope all these measures will be contained in terms of such disease outbreaks, at least this season, and education also, where we are seeing some regressions in enrollment, completion rates, dropouts by pupils and students. So again, and yet human capital is among one of our priorities. Without that, the development or economic growth effort in the long run is compromised. So I don't task expectations to be fulfilled again, but these expectations, I think we would like them managed, and as I emphasized earlier on, if we can see the confidence coming back, confidence in expenditure and controls, but yet also the priority indicating that we nevertheless, under this constrained situation, will allocate increased amounts to these sectors as a sign of confidence.
Absolutely, and you raise very important thought-provoking questions there, and I did note that you spent quite some time talking about agriculture, because that's one key sector that the government is always urging Zambians to diversify towards. And in subsequent budgets, we have seen the support that government has given to the agriculture sector, not only through FISIP, but other measures also in terms of zero rating the import duty for heavy machinery and equipment in the agriculture sector. But in the recent past, we have another school of thought that's coming through to say that probably the government must just take the bull by its horns and just scrap the FISIP altogether until they come up with something that is manageable. Your comment to that?
It's a point of debate. I personally have been against the scrapping of FISIP. Reason is simple. Our economy is dual structure, shall we say. We have a very underdeveloped rural sector, and then the urban sector, which is developing much faster, and as a consequence causing all this rural-urban migration from rural areas to urban areas, unfortunately. Our marketing is almost it is there, but it's not as developed as we would like it to be, and yet farmers are producers, not marketers, and this is a point I always make. And we look at worldwide agricultural transformation. It's been preceded by uncontinued subsidies allocation. We're not saying subsidies should continue, but unless we can get inputs to our farmers at affordable rates, and we've seen the response. 18 years ago, when our agriculture was down and under, it only took changes to the marketing arrangements by the late Levi Mwanawasa and Minister of Agriculture to get the surplus within 2 years. And we can look at agriculture productivity and output world over through cooperatives, through subsidies. And the important thing is you have time limits. You have a strategy around how you manage the process. But it's important to get your economy going.
And just as you are on this thought, when we come back from the Vox Pops that we're about to show, I just want you to address the fact that FISIP is one area where most people, including government themselves, they have come up and openly confessed that it's being abused. It's one loophole where the money that is targeted to get to the vulnerable farmers in the rural areas, like you say, is not reaching the intended target, and millions are being lost through that. That's why this group of people are thinking the school of thought now is changing to say, why don't you shut it down, work on it, and come up with something that you can literally control. But I understand that you are propagating for marketing as well in the agriculture sector.
Yes.
All right, I think now we have to get to the streets of the Copper Belt and just find out what people on the Copper Belt are expecting in next year's budget.
Some of the pupils, our children are failing to go to the colleges or to the university because of lack of funds. If the minister can look into that, they give some bursaries to those who are not able to pay. And also youth empowerment. A lot of youths, they are just roaming the streets. They've got nothing to do.
A big allocation should be done to education as well as other areas, mainly health and education. These are two critical areas. So, and it's not just the matter of pronouncements. We want money to be seen working.
They have to empower youth and women. Yeah, they have to be empowered, especially those who are doing business. I think they should also add small loans for these women.
There are times when plans are made, but the projects are not done. I would wish that when they plan and they allocate the money, they quickly begin to implement.
I think the education sector is a little starving, right? And we expect more in this budget to go to education sector.
One Zambia, one nation.
Whether you're laying down foundations for your business or restructuring market goals, it's important to have professionals that you can trust. Chartered accountants are key to business growth to help you bring your ventures to the world. That's why you should make sure you have a CA Zambia on board. CA Zambia is a globally recognized chartered accountancy qualification that ensures our chartered accountants uphold international standards and stay informed on the best accounting practices worldwide. Keep your business growth healthy. Go with a CA Zambia certified accountant. CA Zambia, developing business leaders.
We're coming to you live from Parliament grounds here in Lusaka, where we're expecting the 2019 budget presentation by Ministry of Finance Margaret Monakatwe. Chitalu will soon be conducting an interview with Invest Trust, Merchant Bank, who are partners of KPMG. Chitalu.
Well, thank you so much, Inutu. As Inutu has said, I'm now joined by the MD for Invest Trust Bank, and that's Mr. Simangolwa Shakalima. Mr. Shakalima, thank you for taking this interview. Now, very quickly, the issue of expectations, the expectations are extremely high from various stakeholders. What is the situation in your case?
Yeah, no, indeed, I think the expectations are quite high. Especially given recent developments. I think from my side, one wants to take it from the president's speech when he was opening, Parliament, in the sense that I think that speech was a precursor to things that were going to come through. And I think for me, there are three areas basically where I'm expecting the minister to touch on.
Mr. Shakalima, can I just hold this interview for now?
Well, there you have it on picture there, the Minister of Finance, Margaret Monakatwe, holding the copper briefcase. Dr. Chita, there you can see, isn't it? Copper is very significant to Zambia because that's our national resource. The Minister taking her time to pose for the cameras. She is accompanied by her husband, and she is taking the historic walk as the second woman in the history of this country to be in charge of the income and expenditure of the country for the next fiscal year. Showing off the copper briefcase, and that's where the all-important document that everyone has been waiting for today is contained. What do you think is running on her mind, across her mind, as she takes those steps? Is she nervous?
I almost asked you that question. I'm sure it's only natural to be a little bit nervous, even if you've done it 10 times or 15 times. The next time is never the same as the last time. So she certainly must have some nervousness as she is at least walking. I'm sure by the time she's reading it, that will have passed. And it's interesting. She knows that the whole nation is watching her, and a whole lot of people's hopes around what she's going to read in the next few minutes. So there is that sense of, well, I'm carrying Zambia on my shoulders, at least for the next couple of hours, isn't it?
Absolutely. And we already have been hearing through media reports that the unions are expectant. They've been talking about the exemption to tax, the threshold there. They're actually pushing that it is increased. At the same time, they're also wondering whether the the tax bands will also be reviewed, because the highest, I think, is 37.5%, and they're actually thinking that, well, it has to be brought down in this economic climate that we are experiencing. So it's quite a momentous occasion and a time in the history of this country, and especially that she hasn't been long in that portfolio, and she's having to come here and make a proposition of quite some significant amount of money.
Absolutely. I mean, she took over this responsibility, and she's had to settle down. She has to come to grips. Of course, she was in a related ministry that should help, Ministry of Commerce. But we know finance is a different kettle of fish sometimes from commerce. And so it's a challenge that, well, she seems to have settled into the job probably better than most had thought. So I'm sure that helps.
Dr. Bona, just now we have to cross back to an interview that Chitalu was conducting with the MD for Invest Trust. As pictures on your screen there, you can see that the chamber is quite relaxed. Well, she has walked in. And
quite relaxed.
Quite
You're
relaxed,
right.
yes.
Yeah, so yeah.
She's just got everything I think that she needs to do. She's done all the preparations. She's confident. She's gone over and over the figures and the justification.
Oh yeah, we know she has a team of technocrats who are number crunchers, and also she's an accountant as well, so she may be quite comfortable with some aspects of the budget. Yeah.
Chitalu, pick it up.
Thank you so much, Inutu. Mr. Shakalima, we did cut our interview briefly there so that we could allow our viewers to witness the arrival of the minister. But earlier on, you were speaking about your expectations with regards to what is contained in that copper briefcase.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the starting point is really the president's speech. I think that was a precursor to what we should be expecting to see in the budget. And one of the key areas is obviously the diversification agenda. So I expect to see pronouncements and efforts around supporting other sectors other than mining, particularly agriculture. So I expect to see quite a bit of support going to the agriculture sector, construction, wholesale, and trade. So I expect to see pronouncements around those areas. I think the second thing is around just equity, especially from a social sector perspective. So in terms of health, education, and community development. So I expect to see that there will be some pronouncements around that. And lastly, probably just around the broad objectives. I think we're a bit bullish now, around expectations around the GDP in terms of growth. I think most of the sectors are beginning to ramp up, in terms of performance. So I expect to see broadly, a bit of ambitious targets around GDP growth rate going into 2019, and obviously on the monetary side, still holding, inflation levels below single digits.
I'd also like to find out from you, Mr. Shakalima, in terms of inputting to this particular budget, was there any participation from your part?
Yes, there was. As a matter of fact, I think for the banking sector, we are usually represented under the Bankers Association of Zambia. So under BAS, we did submit. We obviously sat down together as different players in the industry, looked at the current developments, where we're seeing them, and the support that we expect the minister to give us. Because as you would appreciate, the banking sector plays a key role in terms of economic development. Because if you like, all the financial transactions pass through us. So we did submit, and I think the practice, especially in the last 3 years, has been quite impressive in the sense that more than 80% of our submissions have been taken on board.
Right. Now, also just, to pick your mind on the issue of, the implementation of the budget. In past years, how would you describe the manner in which, the budget has actually been implemented and, achieved the intended results?
Yeah, so I think, if you look at in terms of implementation, I think the track record is there, to show for itself. I think there's been tremendous efforts towards, achieving that. I think where I see deviation has usually been in terms of unforeseen factors. especially when it comes to commodity prices. I think they've had an impact in terms of economic outlook. But I think the discipline around following through some of the projects, following through some of the pronouncements, I think that the government has done pretty well in terms of that area. I think from where I'm sitting, I'm pretty confident that even going forward, that will be maintained, because it just brings credibility to the whole process.
Earlier on, I did speak with Mr. Leonard Mwanza from the Bankers Association of Zambia, obviously where you do belong, and we spoke about the background of this particular budget, with the austerity measures that have been announced by government, and looking at how the fiscal year is likely to pan out. I'd like to get your thoughts with regards to that.
So I think clearly, if you look at this year, it was one that was coming off the back of changes that happened, particularly in 2017 under Zambia Plus budget. I think what informed all the changes was the difficult period that the country experienced in 2015, 2016. So 2017, from where I'm sitting, was a year that the country started turning in terms of putting in fiscal discipline. Obviously, there are issues of debt. I'm sure she will not avoid that subject of debt. But strictly speaking, we're at a stage where fiscal austerity measures are unavoidable. So I expect to see government expenditure being tightened. I expect to see governance and controls being elevated to just make sure that there's no wastage in the process. I expect to see reprioritization of certain projects so that there's focus on those that have higher impact. So I think those are some of the areas I expect to see as the minister delivers the budget speech.
Well, the minister is already in, and so I will let you go, Mr. Shakalima, so that you can take your seat, and perhaps at a later stage we may be talking to speak about reactions to the budget.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it.
Thank you so much. Inetu?
Thank you very much, Talu. One picture coming to you there on your screen. You can see that different members of parliament are congratulating Margaret Mwanakatwe, Minister of Finance, and posing for pictures. What is not too clear from where we are, Doc, is that we're not seeing her carrying the copper briefcase, isn't it? She must have put it somewhere. It's resting on some table, probably ready to be opened and deliver that all-important speech.
Yes. Now it's pausing time a little bit, so no, forget the hard work for a while. She has done that.
Yeah, definitely. I think she has laid it on the table.
Relax.
A chance to relax before the world's cameras in terms of media attention, because we live in a global village, obviously. So everyone is interested in hearing what government intends to promote in terms of sectors next year. Yeah? Yes,
we were just talking, you asked, you raised the issue of the external sector, sector and international community. Yes, so they are watching the commitments we have with our partners, commercial or bilateral, multilateral. So yes, there is that focus on what is the message going to come out from that copper briefcase.
The government from time immemorial, not time immemorial really, in the recent past, having realized that we cannot just depend on copper mining as our mainstay economic activity, they've encouraged that the country diversifies. And like we were saying before, we said that agriculture is one such area where there have been a lot of incentives offered. Do you want to haphazard a guess which other area we can diversify to as an economy?
In terms of our ability to sustain external shocks and of course have a robust domestic economy, we cannot also avoid manufacturing sector. And we can see the linkage, the relationship. You produce from the land, you process from the firms and the plants. You are adding value, and that has been a missing link right now in our development process, industrialization and agricultural development. We've got to forge those links between the manufacturing sector and the agricultural sector. It's really it's really perplexing that you produce maize, you produce soya, and all these other things, and we export them in finished form within the region. We are not processing. If you recall, at one time, our cotton industry was quite developed. We had swap spinning mills. We had the cotton and weaving industry on the Copper Belt and southern province, in Lusaka as well. Things are no longer as active as they are, and those were the natural value-added aspects of the value chain, and we've got to go back to some of these relationships to ensure that we are maximizing on the enormous potential that this country has. There's no reason why we should have 60% of our population in poverty in rural areas. Absolutely none. All the land, all the water, the fertile soils, and yet those are the statistics we're looking at, where households, children can't have a meal a day, can't be in school. But as we said, we can't address that from one budget, but we can lay the foundation and reinforce that foundation.
It's quite interesting that you mentioned that. So in my mind, there are two things that come up. One would be for us to probably explore the competitive advantage that Zambia has in the Southern African region, because some of these things...
And beyond.
And beyond.
Yes. I mean, look at Kenya and its exports to Europe. Really, if we put our task to it, I don't think really we would not give Kenya a run for their money, South Africa. Whatever grows in South Africa, I believe grows better here. Whether it's the apples, whatever it is, it's the wheat, you name it. And our farmers have demonstrated that ability and capacity to maximize on that potential.
So again, Doc, it's the linkages in terms of the marketing in the agriculture sector. More than anything else, what we need to put right as a country are policies that encourage marketing.
Marketing. Can I take you up on that? Marketing. There is a vacuum in marketing. We've assumed that private individuals can fill in this vacuum. It's partly a correct assumption, but partly a wrong assumption. Because of the nature of Zambia, it's a huge country. We have one of the lowest population densities, something like 17 persons per square kilometer. To be able to move efficiently and cheaply by private, not many of our private entrepreneurs and business people have that capacity. So we must support the marketing arrangements. Without the marketing arrangements, very difficult to get agriculture up and going. It's a lesson I think we need to accept, both as individuals and on the part of our government, that they can not be as efficient and as rapid as development rates that we would like if agriculture doesn't take off.
So in this case, what about the argument where some people say, government must not be involved in business. They must just propagate policy. Because if I get what you're saying or proposing is that we should admit that some sectors cannot do without government support.
Yes. Bottom line, it's well and good to put responsibilities and let the private sector thrive. There is a process that in the meantime, as things are happening, the government must intervene. I do not subscribe to principle of markets when you don't have markets that exist to efficiently allocate resources. And that's what we forget, that it's about resource allocation and prices saving as a mechanism for where do people invest in transportation, where do they set up storage bands and so on to move agricultural produce up, and paying the farmer the right price and getting the price right. It sounds simple, but we've had...
This is food for thought, Doc. Food for thought.
All right. As you can see in your pictures, the proceedings inside the House have begun, and we're able to see the Speaker proceeding to take his seat. And this signifies that what everyone has been waiting for is about to begin.
Prayer. Almighty God, who in your infinite wisdom and providential goodness has appointed officers of leaders and parliaments for the welfare of society and the just government of the people, we beseech you to consider with your abundant favor us, your servants, whom you have been pleased to call to the performance of such important responsibilities in this land. Let your blessing descend upon us here in Parliament assembled, and grant that we may, as in your presence, treat and consider all matters that shall come under our deliberation in so just and faithful a manner as promote your honor and glory and to advance the peace, prosperity, and welfare of our country and of those whose interests you have committed to our charge. Amen. May the acting leader of government business indicate business of the House for next week.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to acquaint the House of the business it will consider next week. Sir, On Tuesday, 2nd October 2018, the business of the House will begin with questions for oral answer. This will be followed by presentation of government bills, if there will be any. Thereafter, the House will commence the debate on the motion of supply on the 2019 national budget, which the Honorable Minister of Finance will present today. On Wednesday, 3rd October 2018, the business of the House will start with questions for oral answer. This will be followed by private members' motions, if there will be any. Thereafter, the House will deal with presentation of government bills, if there will be any. The House will then continue the debate on the motion of supply on the 2019 national budget. Sir, on Thursday, 4th October 2018, the business of the House will commence with questions for oral answer. This will be followed by presentation of government bills, if there will be any. Thereafter, the House will continue the debate on the motion of supply on the 2019 national budget. Mr. Speaker, on Friday, 5th October 2018, the business of the House will start with the Vice President's question time. This will be followed by questions for oral answer. Thereafter, the House will consider presentation of government bills, if there will be any. The House will then resume the debate on the motion of supply on the 2019 national budget. Mr. Speaker, I thank you.
Notice of motion. The Honorable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the House do now resolve into Committee of Supply of Estimates and Revenue and Expenditure for the year January 2019 to 31st December 2019, presented to the National Assembly on Friday, 28 September 2018. Sir, I am a bearer of a message from His Excellency, Mr. Edgar Chagwa Lungu, President of the Republic of Zambia, recommending favorable consideration of the motion that I now lay on the table.
The question is that the House do now resolve into Committee on Supply on the estimates of revenue and expenditure for the year 1st January 2019 to 31st December 2019, presented to the National Assembly in September 2018. Any debate? The Honorable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, this is my first budget address since I was granted the rare privilege to serve as Minister of Finance. Let me take this opportunity to thank His Excellency, Mr. Edgar Chagwa Lungu, President of the Republic of Zambia, for bestowing this great honor on me. It is a privilege I do not take lightly and intend to execute my duty diligently. Sir, allow me to thank my predecessor, Honorable Felix Mutati, MP, who steered the economic fortunes of our great nation over the past 1.5 years. all can attest the Honourable Minister gave his best. I will work diligently and invest all my energies to build on his achievements. Mr. Speaker, as I present this budget, I wish to emphasize that Zambia is and will remain a Christian nation whose values, principles, and ethics in all aspects of life are anchored on our covenant with God. These values will always be maintained and mainstreamed in our policies and national development plans to guide our attitudes and our aspirations. Sir, this is the 8th budget presented to this august House under the stewardship of the Patriotic Front government. It is therefore almost a decade since the Patriotic Front became the custodians of the fortunes of the Zambian people. This is an opportune time for us as a nation to reflect on the progress that we have made and lessons learned in our quest to create an inclusive and just society so that no one is left behind. Mr. Speaker, this Patriotic Front government, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, the Patriotic Front government has made great progress in developing our country. This is evidenced by the notable achievements we have made, which include the amendment of the Republican Constitution, expansion in our health and education facilities, and enhanced interconnectivity of our country through improved road and information and communication technology infrastructure. We have also scaled up the provision of social safety nets for the vulnerable. We will consolidate and build on these achievements. Sir, government has laid the ground for a more inclusive economy. However, we acknowledge that growth remains below our country's potential and poverty remains high, especially in rural areas. To address these challenges, the private sector needs to be encouraged to invest, innovate, and create jobs. In practice, this means that government needs to reduce the fiscal deficit, maintain debt within sustainable levels, and build a smart Zambia to stimulate private sector investment. Mr. Speaker, the budget I'm presenting today continues to build on the firm foundation that has been laid in the past 7 years and addresses the challenges that we face head on. It is a budget that seeks to progressively reduce the fiscal deficit, maintain a sustainable debt position, and safeguard the vulnerable in our society. These are the key issues of our time, and we must deal with them decisively. By doing so, we lay the foundation for higher and sustainable growth. developing countries are projected to grow by 4.9% compared with 4.7% in 2017. This is due to continued strong economic performance in emerging markets in Asia. Economic growth for sub-Saharan Africa is projected to rise to 3.4% from 2.8% in 2017, riding on favorable commodity prices. However, trade tensions between the United States and other major economies, as well as the strengthening of the United States dollar, which led to the depreciation of currencies for emerging and developing countries, pose downside risks to these projections. Sir, in line with the high global growth, commodity prices trended upwards in 2018. Copper prices averaged $6,723 per ton in the first 8 months of 2018, compared with $5,892 per metric ton in the same period in 2017. However, the prices moderated after the first half of the year and are now around $6,000 per metric ton. Mr. Speaker, crude oil prices have also been rising, averaging $71 per barrel in the first 8 months of 2018, compared to $49 per barrel in the same period in 2017. The price per barrel is now around $80. This upward trend is projected to continue for the rest of 2018. Sir, let me now turn to developments in the domestic economy. Economic growth, Mr. Speaker. The economy in 2018 is projected to grow at around 4% from 3.4% in 2017. This is due to improved performance in sectors such as mining, construction, manufacturing, wholesale and retail trade, as well as stable and reliable energy supply that is supporting growth. However, agriculture output was subdued in the last farming season due to prolonged dry spells given our dependence on rain-fed agriculture. Budget performance, Mr. Speaker. Sir, overall revenue and grants for 2018 are expected to be broadly in line with the 2018 budget projections. However, expenditures are projected to be higher on account of higher interest payments and project loan disbursements. Consequently, the budget deficit is estimated at 7.4% of GDP against the target of 6.1%. I will later highlight during this budget address what government is doing to reduce the deficit to 6.5% of GDP in 2019. The debt position, Mr. Speaker. Government's external debt stock as at end of June 2018 was $9.4 billion, representing 34.7% of GDP from $8.7 billion as at the end of December 2017. The increase was on account of disbursements on existing loans. The total stock of government-guaranteed debt stock stood at $1.2 billion as at the end of June 2018. Sir, the stock of domestic debt in the form of government securities amounted to 51.9 billion kwacha as at the end of June 2018, representing 19.2% of GDP compared to 48.4 billion as at the end of December 2017. Domestic arrears amounted to 13.9 billion by end of March 2018 from 12.7 billion as at December 2017. Monetary and financial performance, Mr. Speaker. Implementation of monetary and supervisory policies by the Bank of Zambia continued to focus on containing inflation within the target band of 6 to 8%, strengthening the resilience of the financial sector and supporting economic activity. The policy rate was reduced to 9.75% in May 2018 from 12.5% in November 2017. Over the same period, the statutory reserve ratio was reduced to 5% from 8%. Sir, inflation remained relatively stable within the target range of 6 to 8% in the first half of 2018. Inflation was 7.9% in September 2018 from 6.1% in December 2017. Food inflation was a key driver of the increase and was recorded at 8.6% in September 2018 compared to 4.8% in December 2017. Over the same period, non-food inflation reduced to 7.3% from 7.5%. Mr. Speaker, following the easing of monetary policy, lending rates declined to an average of 23.5% in August 2018 from an average of 26.7% in December 2017. These rates, however, remain too high to support private sector growth. Consequently, domestic credit to the private sector remained relatively subdued, with growth of 6.7% during the year to August 2018. Non-performing loans at 11.9% as at end of August 2018 remained above the prudential threshold of 10%. Sir, government has been concerned with the high cost of most financial services, which has been constraining business expansion as well as financial inclusion. To address this, the Bank of Zambia in August issued directives to do away with unwarranted bank charges and fees. Mr. Speaker, in an effort to strengthen the legal framework of credit provision, the Credit Reporting Act was enacted in July 2018. This provides for the effective functioning of the credit reporting system. This, together with the Movable Property Security Interest Act No. 3 of 2016, should help to reduce risks associated with information asymmetry and use of movable property placed as collateral. Sir, in the 2018 budget address, government informed this August House that Intermarket Banking Corporation Limited had been restructured. I'm glad to inform this House that the Zambia Industrial Commercial Bank Limited opened its doors to the public in August this year, having taken over the assets of Intermarket Banking Corporation, which is in liquidation. External sector performance, Mr. Speaker. Export earnings increased by 20.7% to $4.6 billion during the first half of 2018, from $3.8 billion over the same period in 2017. Copper export earnings were the largest contributor at $3.5 billion from $2.9 billion, following an increase in both price and export volumes. Non-traditional exports increased by 17.7% to $911 million from $774.1 million. Sir, notwithstanding the increase in the export earnings, the current account deficit widened to $756.5 million in the first half of 2018, compared to $340 million in the corresponding period in 2017. This was explained by higher growth in imports relative to export earnings, an increase in interest payments on public sector external debt, and dividend payments to non-resident shareholders. Mr. Speaker, gross international reserves declined to $1.8 billion, or about 2 months of import cover at the end of July 2018, from $2.1 billion at end of December 2017. However, government remains committed to achieving its medium-term objective of maintaining reserves of at least 4 months of import cover. Sir, in the foreign exchange market, the kwacha remained relatively stable. The kwacha depreciated by 0.9% to an average of 10.10 kwacha per United States dollar in August 2018, from 10.01 in December 2017. The depreciation was mainly on the backdrop of the strengthening of the United States dollar. However, Mr. Speaker, during the month of September 2018, the market has seen increased pressure on the exchange rate, mainly due to increased demand for foreign exchange by fuel importers. Update on implementation of reforms, Mr. Speaker. Government remains committed to implementing reforms as outlined in the Economic Stabilization and Growth Programme and the 7th National Development Plan. Notable policy, structural and legislative reforms have been undertaken in agriculture, public financial management, domestic resource mobilization, and state-owned enterprises. Sir, in the agriculture sector, government fully migrated the implementation of the Farmer Input Support Programme to the electronic voucher system in the 2017-2018 farming season. This contributed to the reduction of beneficiaries to about 716,000 beneficiaries, from 1.6 million, through the elimination of duplications and ineligible farmers. This was broadly in line with a target of 1 million beneficiaries. Further, government restricted the Food Reserve Agency to the purchase of 500,000 metric tons of grain for the National Food Reserve Agency. Mr. Speaker, the Public Finance Management Act of number 1 of 2018 was enacted in April 2018. This is to support and anchor fiscal prudence, as well as make it more punitive for abuse and misapplication of funds. Sir, to enhance domestic resource mobilization, government has undertaken reforms such as the appointment of tax agents, piloting of electronic fiscal devices, digitization of tax stamps, and the land titling program. Mr. Speaker, to raise compliance across tax types, appointment of tax agents has been extended to the collection of base tax, turnover tax, withholding tax on rental income, and presumptive taxes on public transport operators. Further, electronic fiscal devices have been distributed to selected taxpayers to capture business transactions in real time. In this regard, valuable lessons are being learned to inform the full rollout of these devices. Sir, over the years, considerable revenue in excise taxes has been lost through illicit trade and tax evasion schemes. This is compounded by the noted weaknesses in the current manual tax stamp system, which is prone to manipulation and fraud. In order to address this, Zambia Revenue Authority has embarked on a project to digitize the manual tax stamp system. The digital tax stamps will enhance the administration of excise duty through its track and trace capability. The tax stamp system, which is currently limited to cigarettes, will be extended to other exercisable products. The project is scheduled to be rolled out in May of 2019. Mr. Speaker, to accelerate the implementation of land titling program, government rolled out the exercise to 16 district councils and established the National Land Titling Center in Lusaka. Further, an automated workflow process for national land titling was developed. This will enable collection of property ownership details and spatial data to develop a geo-database. Sir, some progress has been observed with regard to the performance of state-owned enterprises. In 2018, out of the 29 state-owned enterprises under the Industrial Development Corporation, 15 posted profits, out of which 8 declared dividends. In addition, 2 out of 16 companies that are still under the Ministry of Finance were also profitable, and declared dividends. This brings the total number of profitable state-owned enterprises to 17 out of 45. Mr. Speaker, we have attained key milestones in our development agenda. However, much more needs to be done in this regard. Key reforms will be undertaken in 2019 in the electricity and petroleum sectors, as well as land titling, amongst others. Let me turn to part 2, macroeconomic objectives, policies, and strategies for 2019. Sir, in 2019, the government will continue to promote not only broad-based sustainable and inclusive growth, but also address the high unemployment and poverty levels amongst our people, creating space for private sector growth and entrenching macroeconomic stability through fiscal consolidation in being central to this process. Mr. Speaker, this budget is aligned to the Economic Stabilization and Growth Programme and the 7th National Development Plan, and our vision of becoming a prosperous middle-income country by 2030. Sir, the specific macroeconomic objectives for 2019 will be to 1, attain annual GDP growth rates of at least 4%. 2, sustain inflation within the range of 6 to 8%. 3, raise international reserves to at least 3 months of import cover. 4, increase domestic revenue to not less than 18% of GDP. 5, reduce the fiscal deficit to 6.5% of GDP. 6, prioritize the dismantling of arrears and curtail accumulation. And 7, reduce the pace of debt accumulation and ensure sustainability. Mr. Speaker, I will now outline the critical sector policies and interventions in line with the pillars contained in our 7th National Development Plan that will ensure that we sustain growth while ensuring no one is left behind. Pillar 1, economic diversification and job creation. Sir, attaining broad-based inclusive growth requires that we pursue our diversification agenda more aggressively. The sectors which can drive growth and help us attain shared prosperity through creating employment opportunities remain agriculture, tourism, and manufacturing. These will be supported by the energy, transport, and finance sectors. The mining sector will also continue to be important through its linkages with other sectors and the generation of foreign exchange. Agriculture, livestock, and fisheries. Mr. Speaker, the agriculture sector is the largest source of livelihood for our people. A diversified and export-oriented agriculture sector is critical to uplifting the living standards of our people. Agricultural productivity, however, remains very low, especially amongst small-scale farmers. This low productivity is attributed to overdependence on rain-fed agriculture, poor agriculture practices, and limited mechanization. Other challenges include poor market linkages and low value addition to agricultural output due to inadequate agro-processing industries. Sir, in an effort to reduce dependence on rain-fed agriculture and to promote all-year-round production, as well as climate-smart agricultural practices, government will continue to develop irrigation infrastructure. In this regard, the development of irrigation infrastructure at Momboshi in Chisamba, Musakashi in Mufulira, and Lusitu in Chirundu will be finalized in 2019, bringing an additional 3,000 hectares under irrigation, mainly for small-scale farmers. Mr. Speaker, good agriculture practices, such as the use of certified seed and application of fertilizer, are crucial to improving productivity. To this end, government undertook to fully implement the e-voucher system under the Farmer Input Support Program in the 2018 agriculture season. Over 716,000 farmers accessed inputs under the e-voucher system. Further, around 5,800 agro dealers throughout the country were involved in the supply of agro inputs. Under this program, farmers can access inputs of their choice, thereby creating opportunities for diversification in the sector. Sir, a number of challenges were observed with the e-voucher system during the 2017-2018 farmer season. Key amongst these were limitations of telecommunication connectivity, financial services provision challenges, and limited information technology. As these challenges are being addressed in the 2018-2019 farming season, government will procure and distribute inputs to the affected parts of the country. The affected districts will be reintroduced on the e-voucher system in 2019 once the challenges have been resolved. Mr. Speaker, mechanization in the agriculture sector is critical to improving productivity. In this regard, the establishment of the $100 million tractor assembly plant in the Lusaka South Multi-Facility Economic Zone is on course to help farmers access cheaper equipment to improve mechanization. Mr. Speaker, let me repeat. In this regard, the establishment of the $100 million tractor assembly plant in the Lusaka South Multi-Facility Economic Zone is on course to help farmers access cheaper equipment to improve mechanization. In addition, government, through Public Service Microfinance Company, will continue to facilitate access to agricultural equipment to those in the public service. Sir, to increase land under cultivation, government has revised guidelines for land acquisition in farm blocks to foster public-private partnership in the development of infrastructure. This is with a view to accelerate progress in infrastructure development in farm blocks such as Nansanga, Luswishi, and Luena. Mr. Speaker, to support and enhance exports of agricultural products, government revised the seed regulations in 2018 to harmonize them with requirements under the Common Market for Eastern and Southern Africa, the Southern African Development Community, and the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. These new regulations are expected to further expand export markets for Zambian seeds. Government will also revise the Food Reserve Act in 2019 to enhance sustainability and efficient management of national strategic food reserve. In 2019, government will continue with the policy of only maintaining 500,000 metric tons of grain as strategic food reserve. Sir, under the livestock subsector, the focus will continue to be on livestock breed improvement through stocking and restocking, artificial insemination, and construction and rehabilitation of infrastructure. Given the rising market potential for livestock, especially for goats, sheep, and cattle, government will facilitate access to both local and foreign markets for livestock products with strategic focus on the exportation of goats to Saudi Arabia. Mr. Speaker, to control the outbreak of diseases, government will continue to implement preventive measures against diseases such as foot-and-mouth diseases and East Coast fever. Further, government will continue the development of ongoing infrastructure such as regional laboratories, quarantine facilities, and deep tanks. Vaccine production will be scaled up at the Central Veterinary Research Institute. In addition, government will continue to implement sanitary and phytosanitary measures to facilitate access to international markets for livestock products. Sir, in the fisheries subsector, the promotion of cage fish farming on Lakes Mweru, Kariba, Tanganyika, and Bangwawulu, as well as along the Kafua River at Kasaka, and in the water bodies of the Western Province will continue. This will be done under the auspices of the Zambia Aquaculture Enterprise Development Project. Mr. Speaker, through this project and the Agriculture Production and Market Enhancement Project, government has acquired 170 fish cages and 280 fish pens. Government also procured motor vehicles and water vessels to support the establishment of cage fish farming and aquaculture parks in Rufunsa, in Mwingu, in Kasempa, in Chipepo, and Samfia. Further, in collaboration with the private sector, 2 fish feed plants have been established in Siabonga. Government will continue to facilitate the establishment of more plants countrywide. Mr. Speaker, let me turn to industrialization. Sir, government has been working on the setting up of multi-facility economic zones and industrial parks and other support infrastructure to accelerate industrialization. I'm glad to report that the program has now gained traction. The actualized investment into the multi-facility economic zones is estimated at $3.3 billion, with more than 15,000 jobs created, Mr. Speaker. The actualized investment into the multi-facility economic zones is estimated at $3.3 billion, with more than 15,000 jobs being created. Mr. Speaker, to promote local content, government is implementing the National Local Content Strategy aimed at fostering business linkages between micro, small, medium, and large enterprises. The strategy also aims to promote the use of at least 35% locally available inputs in industrial processes. Sir, government, through the Zambia Development Agency, is implementing business linkage program aimed at creating synergies in industry and market access for micro, small, and medium enterprises. So far, 1,059 small and medium enterprises have been linked to markets, whilst 1,274 enterprises were provided with business development services. Further, our farmers are currently benefiting from supplying barley and cassava for industrial use. Government will continue to support investments in value addition by, amongst others, procuring of locally manufactured goods, such as school furniture, uniforms, and hospital linen. The Buy Zambia campaign will also be aggressively promoted. Mr. Speaker, to add value to agricultural produce, government, through the Industrial Development Corporation, will make investments in pineapple processing in Northwestern Province, fruit processing in Eastern Province, and cashew nut processing in Western Province. Further, in Muchinga Province, an outgrower scheme for palm oil trees will be rolled out to 500 households, covering an initial 380 hectares under the Industrial Development Corporation. Government will, over the next 5 years, expand the scheme to cover 20,000 hectares in Luapula and Muchinga provinces, with over 25,000 farmers benefiting. This will boost the country's capacity to produce edible oils. Regional and international trade. Sir, to enhance regional and international trade, government is implementing a number of interventions. Key initiatives of implementation in 2019 and beyond include the enhancement of border management through legislation review, which will enable, amongst others, the use of the National Electronic Single Window for trade facilitation. The ultimate objective is to ensure that trade is facilitated through single payment points that avoid multiple interventions at our borders. Mr. Speaker, the concept of one-stop border post has remained an important element in our efforts to facilitate regional and international trade. In this regard, Government, with support from cooperating partners, is developing a one-stop border post at Kazungula and is scheduled to be completed in 2019. Further construction works at Mwami border are earmarked to commence in 2019. Sir, let me turn to the sector of tourism. Sir, the policy focus in tourism will be the diversification of tourism products and promoting domestic tourism. The diversification effort will be achieved by, amongst others, integrating the country's rich cultural heritage into tourism packages beyond traditional ceremonies. As regards foreign tourists, the aim is to lengthen tourist stay to an average of 6 days from the current of 4 days. In order to promote domestic tourism, implementation of a strategy that targets citizens and residents, as well as promotional activities such as use of lower charges, will be encouraged. Mr. Speaker, government will continue with the restocking of wildlife in areas where numbers have been depleted. So far, restocking has been done in Sioma Ngwezi National Park, Bangwaulu Game Management Area, and 7 private game ranches. This exercise is aimed at expanding the tourism resource base from focusing exclusively on the Victoria Falls and the South Luangwa National Park. Sir, to improve access to wildlife tourist sites, government will rehabilitate and maintain roads to and within the major national parks, namely Kafue, South Luangwa, Museo-Tunya, and Lower Zambezi National Parks. This will facilitate all year-round access to tourism sites. Mr. Speaker, to promote international conference tourism, the government will in 2019 commence the upgrade and expansion of Mulungushi International Conference Center. This will enable the country to host the African Union Heads of State Summit scheduled for 2022 to contribute towards implementation of the meetings, incentives, conferences, and exhibition strategy. Let me turn to mining. Sir, the mining sector, being an important source of foreign exchange earnings, plays a critical role in the economy. In this regard, government will continue to promote exploitation of industrial minerals and gemstones by making available geological information. To promote small-scale mining, the Development Mineral Capacity Building Program, with the support of cooperating partners, will continue. The major intervention will be promotion of environmentally and socially responsive mining. Mr. Speaker, government has gained traction in the implementation of the Mineral Production Monitoring Support Project, aimed at enhancing monitoring of mineral production and exports. Currently, all the large-scale mining companies are on the system. In 2019, the system will be extended to cover small and medium mining companies as well as other minerals beyond copper. The system will empower government to collect accurate revenue from mineral royalties and other mining taxes. Energy. Sir, the energy sector is a key enabler for sustained economic growth, diversification, and creation of employment. In this regard, the focus in the energy sector will be to continue with provision of adequate and reliable supply of energy through diversification of energy sources. This will require that investments continue to be undertaken into the sector. Mr. Speaker, in the electricity subsector, a number of projects are currently being undertaken to increase electricity generation, as well as diversify the energy mix. These include, amongst others, 300 megawatts of the second phase of the Mamba coal-fired thermal power, 750 megawatts Kafue Gorge Lower hydropower station, and upgrading of the Lusiwasi hydropower project. The preparation process towards the construction of the 2,400 megawatts Batoka hydropower plant, co-financed by Zambia and Zimbabwe, will continue in 2019. Sir, to diversify the energy mix, government is implementing the Renewable Energy Feed-in Tariff Strategy, which aims to bring an additional 200 megawatts to the national grid. So far, government has commenced the procurement process of the first 100 megawatts under this strategy, and implementation is expected to begin in 2019. Mr. Speaker, under the Scaling Solar Initiative being implemented in the Lusaka South Multi-Facility Economic Zone, the construction of 2 times 50 megawatts projects will be completed in 2019. Construction of additional solar power plants will commence in 2019. Once completed, 200 megawatts will be added to the grid. The target is to generate 600 megawatts under the Scaling Solar Initiative. Sir, it is expected that once these other projects are completed, Zambia will become a net exporter of electricity. Mr. Speaker, migration to cost-reflective electricity pricing remains a priority for government in order to promote investment and growth in the electricity subsector. To ensure that government has a sound basis for adjusting electricity tariffs in the future, a study has been commissioned and once finalized will inform electricity pricing. Sir, to enhance the regulatory framework governing the petroleum subsector, government will bring to this August House the Petroleum Management Bill, which will, amongst others, facilitate enhanced participation of private sector in the procurement and financing of petroleum products. Transport, information and technology infrastructure, Mr. Speaker. Development of transport infrastructure is a prerequisite for achieving growth and development by connecting producers and consumers and lowering transaction costs in both the private and public sectors. In order to support fiscal consolidation efforts, government will focus its domestic resources on infrastructure projects that are at completion rate of 80% and above. Sir, with regard to road infrastructure, government will continue to implement, amongst others, the Link Zambia 8000, township roads, and the rural connectivity project. Sir, there is no question. With regard to road infrastructure, government will continue to implement, amongst others, the Link Zambia 8000, township roads, and the rural connectivity project. In addition, Mr. Speaker, emphasis will be placed on maintenance in order to increase the lifespan of our roads. Mr. Speaker, to ensure sustainable financing for road infrastructure, government embarks on the National Road Tolling Program. So far, a total of 14 inland toll stations have been constructed and are operational across the country, with an additional 6 sites expected to be completed this year. The program has since raised a total of 194.1 million in the first 8 months of 2018, compared to 137.6 million over the same period in 2017. Mr. Speaker, in 2019, an additional 11 sites will be commissioned. Sir, Zambia is on course to become an air transport hub. In this regard, I'm pleased to report to this August House that the expansion and modernization of Kenneth Kaunda International Airport has reached 75% completion, Mr. Speaker. It is expected to be completed in 2019. Construction of the Copperbelt International Airport has also commenced and is at 13% completion, Mr. Speaker. Sir, to increase revenue and derive value from airports, government transferred 10 airports in 2018 to the Zambia Airports Corporation Limited. These are Chinsali, Choma, Chipata, Kasama, Mansa, Mongu, Kasababe, Mbala, South Dance, and Solwezi. That the most vulnerable in our society remain at the forefront of our development agenda. Mr. Speaker, social protection programs, which include social cash transfer schemes, public welfare assistance scheme, the food security pack, and women empowerment programs will continue to be implemented, Mr. Speaker. Let me turn, Mr. Speaker, to the social cash transfer scheme. Sir, government has been increasing the number of beneficiaries under the social cash transfer scheme. Currently, Mr. Speaker, there are over 632 beneficiary households on the program. In 2019, government will maintain the target of 700,000 beneficiaries and will scale up the number in subsequent years. However, recently there has been concerns by stakeholders regarding the administration of the social cash transfer scheme. Mr. Speaker, His Excellency, Mr. Edgar Chagwa Lungu, President of the Republic of Zambia, remains resolute to fully address stakeholder concerns, and appropriate action will be taken in line with the findings of the forensic audit that is currently underway. I therefore appeal to all our cooperating partners to continue supporting this noble program. Sir, let me assure the nation that government will comprehensively review the management and administration of the scheme to ensure that the resources reach the intended beneficiary households. Public Welfare Assistance Scheme, Mr. Speaker. Government has been providing shelter, food, clothing, bursaries, and other basic needs through the Public Welfare Assistance Scheme to incapacitated households and individuals across the country. To continue supporting incapacitated households, the implementation of this scheme will be sustained in 2019. Food Security Pack. Sir, under the Food Security Pack program, government provided agricultural inputs to 27,650 vulnerable but viable financing households in the 2017-2018 farming season. In the 2018-2019 farming season, the target number of beneficiaries is 80,000 households. Implementation of this program will continue in 2019-2020 farming season. Homegrown school feeding program, Mr. Speaker. Government is implementing the school feeding program to increase enrollment, reduce absenteeism, and enhance children's nutritional status and cognitive development. The program currently covers 38 districts, targeting learners at early childhood and primary education levels. In 2018, over 956,000 learners have benefited from the program, with a target for 2019 at 1,250,000 children, Mr. Speaker. Women Empowerment Program, sir, to empower women and girls through provision of resources for development of their skills and livelihood. The government will support, with support from the World Bank, has been undertaking the Girls' Education and Women Empowerment Livelihood Project. To date, a total of 22,000 women beneficiaries have been empowered, with a further 19,000 targeted for 2019. The project is also supporting about 15,000 girls from vulnerable households against the target of 16,000. Mr. Speaker, to enhance monitoring of all social protection and empowerment programs, government is implementing the electronic single registry of beneficiaries under the Food Security Pack, Village Banking, Public Welfare Assistance Scheme, Women Empowerment Programs, Supporting Women's Livelihood Project, and Social Cash Transfer Scheme. The registry will provide key monitoring and management reports required for decision-making. So far, beneficiaries from 15 districts are on the registry. The registry will be extended to a further 20 districts by the end of this year. Youth empowerment. Sir, in 2019, government will focus on providing skills training to out-of-school youth in vocational and life skills through the Youth Resource Centers. In this regard, government targets to train at least 3,000 youths in 2019, compared to 2,500 in 2018. Further, 4 youth resource centers will be completed in addition to the 21 currently in operation. Mr. Speaker, government will also settle 200 youth at Mwange and another 200 at Mufumbwe youth resettlement schemes, where they will be provided with free land and startup kits to engage in agriculture and agro-related activities. To augment the above initiatives, government will provide the youth with the necessary equipment and facilitate the acquisition of working capital to enable them realize their full potential. Climate change and disaster risk reduction. Sir, climate change poses a threat to the environment and to the livelihoods of our people. In line with the National Climate Change Policy launched in 2017, Government has continued to implement a number of interventions in the areas of early warning systems, climate change adaptation, climate change mitigation, and resource mobilization. Early warning systems, Mr. Speaker. Addressing climate change requires enhanced early warning systems and increased capacity to interpret climate change information. To this end, government is strengthening its systems to improve access to weather-related information for synthesis, analysis, and transfer of climate information for assessment of risks and promotion of climate information services is being strengthened. This will result in increased adoption of climate-resilient agricultural practices. Sir, it is important to enhance the capacity of our communities to adapt to adverse effects posed by climate change. In this regard, various adaptation projects are being implemented, with a major intervention being the pilot program on climate resilience in Western, Southern, Central, and Lusaka provinces. Under this program, 320 different communities have benefited from adaptation interventions. In addition, a 237-kilometer climate-resilient road from Kalomo to Dundumwezi up to Teji is being developed. So far, about 90 kilometers of the road has been done, and the whole project is expected to be completed in 2019. Mr. Speaker, I'm glad to report that similar adaptation interventions will be rolled out to Northern, Muchinga, Luapula provinces under the Transforming Landscape for Resilience and Development Program. The preparation of the project, estimated to cost $150 million, is underway. This is $150 million is underway, and funds are expected to be secured from cooperating partners in 2019. Climate change mitigation. Sir, to contribute to global efforts to reduce the carbon footprint, government launched the Zambia Integrated Forestry Landscape Project in Eastern Province in February 2018. This project, worth $32.8 million, will help improve livelihoods, protect the environment, and involve communities in sustainable management of natural resources such as forestry and wildlife. Mr. Speaker, government has submitted a $100 million project to Green Climate Fund aimed at creating a creditworthy intermediary off-taker for renewable energy. It is expected that this will spur investment in the renewable energy sector, thereby reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Resource mobilization for climate change. Sir, implementation of climate change interventions requires enormous financial resource. Government, therefore, continues to mobilize resources to combat climate change and its effects. In 2018, Zambia mobilized a total of $84.5 million from the Green Climate Fund to finance projects in agriculture and energy sectors. With additional co-financing, the estimated total cost is $278 million for the two projects. Pillar 3, Mr. Speaker, reducing developmental inequalities. Sir, government remains concerned with the rural-urban divide and the gender and income inequalities that undermine our quest for a socially just Zambia. Mr. Speaker, in order to address the disparity between rural and urban areas, government will continue investing in rural infrastructure development. Some of the interventions will include construction and rehabilitation of feeder roads under the Rural Connectivity Project, construction of basic infrastructure in newly created districts, and the electrification of rural areas under the Rural Electrification Program. Sir, as part of our effort to address inequality between urban and rural areas, government has embarked on expositions aimed at attracting investments in provinces. To this effect, a provincial expo was successfully held in Luapula province in 2017. 2 others are scheduled to be held in central and northern provinces in the last quarter of 2018. Mr. Speaker, in line with the 7th National Development Plan to reduce developmental inequalities and vulnerability, government in 2019 will accelerate the implementation of Decent Work Country Programme. This is aimed at ensuring that all workers have decent employment, but guarantees them social protection and protects their rights at places of work. In this regard, labour inspections will be intensified to ensure compliance with labour laws and the protection of workers' rights. Pillar 4, enhancing human development. Sir, human development plays a critical role in promoting inclusive growth and laying a foundation for shared future prosperity. In an effort to enhance human development, government has continued to safeguard budget allocations for education, health, as well as water, sanitation sectors. Education and skills development, Mr. Speaker. Education and skills development is cardinal to the development of human capital required for national development. The provision of education and skills to our people should therefore receive our utmost attention. In order to increase access to education and skills, government will in 2019 continue upgrading, constructing and rehabilitating facilities at all levels of education. Sir, a program to upgrade 500 existing basic schools to secondary schools will be undertaken from 2019 to 2022, using low-cost construction design as a way to increase enrollments at secondary levels. Further, government has launched the Zambia Education Enhancement Project that is expected to construct 82 high schools across the country. This project is being implemented with support from the World Bank. In addition, the creation of an enabling environment for private sector investment in the provision of quality education and skills training shall continue. Mr. Speaker, in addition to increasing access to education, government will also ensure that the quality of education provision is improved. To this end, the major programs will be pre- and in-service training of teachers, provision of teaching and learning materials, and ongoing recruitment of teachers. Further, government will prioritize redeployment of serving teachers to underserved areas with the right mix that includes science, mathematics, and information and communication technology. Sir, in order to ensure that affordable teaching and learning materials are readily available in schools, the Zambia Education Publishing House will be recapitalized through a joint venture arrangement. This will enhance the publication and supply of low-cost teaching and learning materials in the country. Mr. Speaker, government has been implementing a 2-tier system which offers learners an opportunity to follow either an academic or vocational career path. Due to effective collaboration between secondary schools and technical education, vocational entrepreneurship training institutions, pupils are now able to take an increasing range of vocational examinations whilst they are still in secondary school. In view of the success scored during this approach to skills development, government will provide additional skills training infrastructure in selected secondary schools across the country to scale up skills training. Sir, the economy continues to face distortions in the labour market, arising from a mismatch between the demand and the supply of skills. To address this challenge, government will in 2019 carry out a skills demand and supply survey to form the basis for designing curricula for skills development and maintaining an inventory of skills in country. Let me turn to the health sector, Mr. Speaker. A healthy population is a prerequisite to socio-economic development. In this regard, government will continue to invest in the health sector. To improve access to health services, government will in 2019 continue to construct health facilities and recruit frontline staff. Sir, to improve the quality of health services in the country, there is need to ensure availability of adequate skills human resources. Government has therefore continued with the recruitment of frontline medical personnel. Between 2016 and 2018, over 15,000 core health workers have been recruited against the 30,000 target by 2021. In 2019, recruitment of frontline staff will continue in order to operationalize the newly constructed health facilities. Mr. Speaker, to build a critical mass of quality health staff, government has embarked on a program of establishing specialized health training facilities. In this regard, government has established Levi Mwanawasa Teaching Hospital and has embarked on upgrading it into a regional training hub. Other facilities offering specialized training include Livingstone, Kitwe, and Ndola teaching hospitals. Currently, 215 doctors out of a target of 500 are undergoing specialized training. Specialized training for nurses in areas such as oncology, public health, and trauma and emergency has also commenced. Sir, in 2019, government aims to achieve a reduction in maternal, infant, and child mortality. This will be achieved through the provision of emergency obstetric and neonatal care equipment and the supply of vaccines and food supplements for children. Efforts will also be made to reduce the malaria disease burden by increasing the coverage of indoor residual spraying, promoting the use of insecticide-treated mosquito nets, and strengthening malaria case management. Mr. Speaker, following the implementation of the test and treat strategy, Zambia has recorded remarkable progress on the antiretroviral therapy coverage. Currently, out of the 1.1 million people who are eligible for antiretroviral therapy, 800,000 people are on treatment, representing a coverage rate of 72.7%. Zambia is on course towards achieving the UNAIDS global target of testing 90% of those found to be HIV positive and are placed on treatment. The measures we have taken will ensure that we achieve the viral suppression of 90% of those treated by 2020. Sir, to ensure medical commodity security, government, in collaboration with corporate partners, will continue to strengthen the scale-up of the timely supply of drugs, especially at lower levels of healthcare provision. In this regard, the establishment of regional medical hubs to achieve the last-mile distribution of drugs and other essential medical commodities has continued. So far, Mpika, Mansa, Choma, and Chipata medical hubs have been completed, whilst Luansha is due to be completed by the end of 2018. Mongo and Kabompo are the next districts scheduled to have medical hubs. Mr. Speaker, government will in 2019 commence the implementation of the National Health Insurance Act No. 2 of 2018. The implementation will be done in a phased manner and will ensure universal access to quality healthcare services. Water supply and sanitation. Sir, provision of clean and safe drinking water, as well as adequate sanitation services, is crucial to avoid the spread of preventable waterborne diseases such as cholera and typhoid. In this regard, government has strengthened the regulatory framework in the management of groundwater resources in order to protect and preserve water resources from pollution and contamination. Mr. Speaker, government will in 2019 continue with improving water and sanitation systems across the country. The key interventions include water resource management, national urban water supply and sanitation, and the national rural water supply and sanitation programs. These programs will involve construction and rehabilitation of bulk water supply infrastructure, small dams, and drilling of boreholes. Mr. Speaker, let me turn to Pillar 5, creating a conducive governance environment for a diversified and inclusive economy. Policy, regulatory, and structural reforms serve to deliver fiscal consolidation for sustainable and inclusive development. Robust legal policy, regulatory, and structural reforms are required. To this effect, government will diligently implement its bold reform agenda in the areas of fiscal and debt management. This will be complemented by reforms in the monetary and financial sector. Fiscal policy, Mr. Speaker. Fiscal consolidation requires that we reduce the overall budget deficit in order to anchor macroeconomic stability and create space for private sector growth. We must therefore cut expenditure and increase domestic resource mobilization. Sir, it is important to remind ourselves that high fiscal deficits have serious negative consequences. These include reduced levels of credit for private sector growth, higher inflationary pressures, and volatility in the exchange rate. Such consequences affect the poorest members of our society disproportionately. Therefore, achieving long-term fiscal sustainability is an important prerequisite to attaining sustainable and inclusive growth. Mr. Speaker, in 2019, we are faced with higher debt obligations as past loans fall due, thereby constraining fiscal space for other expenditure. However, to protect the most vulnerable in our society, we have prioritized spending on social protection and allocations to the social sectors in general. These efforts will be supported by public financial management reforms aimed at ensuring more effective use of the available public resources. Sir, the key measures that government will undertake include the following. 1, significant reduction in expenditure on administrative parts of the public service so as to prioritize allocations to key service delivery expenditures such as drugs. 2, controlling the growth in the wage bill by restricting recruitment to only 3,500 frontline staff. 3, scaling down domestically financed capital expenditure by phasing the completion of existing projects. In this regard, projects that are at least 80% complete will be prioritized. 4, increasing domestic resource mobilization to 18.7% of GDP through the measures that I'll outline later in my address. And 5, curtailing domestic borrowing from 4% of GDP to 1.4% of GDP. Mr. Speaker, a predictable tax policy regime is vital in encouraging local businesses to expand whilst attracting new investment from both domestic and foreign. To enhance revenue mobilization, government will focus on broadening the tax base and enhancing compliance levels. Key measures to be undertaken include the following. 1, digitalization of all revenue collection processes for government services. This will help reduce rent-seeking behavior. 2, enhancing system interface between the Zambia Revenue Authority and other institutions to maximize the use of third-party data in taxpayer compliance management. 3, review the Rating Act to facilitate mass valuation of properties so that appropriate taxes and fees can be collected. 4, establish a land management authority to deal with all matters relating to the land management and titling. This will accord citizens security of land tenure and boost revenue from ground rent. 5, establish a public auction mechanism for timber and lift the ban on all timber exports. 6, undertake a review of all existing tax exemptions. This will involve, amongst others, stepping up monitoring of all investors who have accessed the tax exemptions to ensure fulfillment of investment pledges. Sir, to support and anchor fiscal prudence, government enacted the Public Finance Management Act earlier this year. The Act strengthens the punitive actions for cases of abuse and misapplication of funds. Further, I will in due course bring before this House revisions to the Public Procurement Act and the Planning and Budgeting Bill. These are aimed at strengthening public financial management. Let me turn to debt management policy, Mr. Speaker. Government is committed to maintaining the debt levels within sustainable limits. In this regard, in June 2018, government undertook to implement a number of measures to return the country to a moderate risk of debt distress in the medium term and to a low risk over the long term. Sir, I announced the austerity measures. Since I announced the austerity measures, I've taken with my government colleagues and under the guidance of His Excellency the President, further consultation on specific measures to reduce planned and existing debt and to reduce debt service obligations over the medium term. I'll, within the current session, be coming to this House with specific details on the implementation of austerity measures related to debt. Mr. Speaker, I wish to reiterate that government remains committed to meeting its debt obligations as and when they fall due and will not take any unilateral action as it designs and implements its debt management strategy. To ensure dissemination of accurate information, government, through my ministry, will continue to provide quarterly updates on the debt position. Arrears dismantling strategy. Sir, the dismantling of arrears remains key to improving liquidity to the private sector in the domestic economy and to promoting economic activity. This will also help to reduce the risks associated with non-performing loans in the banking sector. Government will therefore continue with the dismantling of arrears and strengthen expenditure commitment control systems in order to curb accumulation of new arrears. Monetary and financial sector policies, Mr. Speaker. Monetary policy in 2019 will remain focused on price stability by maintaining the annual inflation rate within the target range of 6 to 8%. The Bank of Zambia will therefore continue to enhance the use of forward-looking monetary policy framework that is anchored on the policy rate as a key signal of the monetary policy stance. This is intended to improve the transmission of price signals and reduce reliance on non-price tools. Further, the liberal foreign exchange system will be maintained, with the Bank of Zambia interventions limited to smoothing short-term fluctuations in the exchange rate and building international reserves. Sir, maintaining a stable financial system and increasing access to formal financial services remains a priority objective of government. To enhance stability of the financial sector, the Deposit Insurance Bill will be brought to this House for legislation in 2019. This provides protection to depositors in event of failure of a bank or other deposit-taking financial institutions. The implementation of the Credit Reporting Act, enacted earlier this year, together with the Movable Property Security Interest Act, will help reduce the risks associated with information asymmetry on borrowers. Mr. Speaker, to further reduce the cost of financial services and modernize payment systems, the National Financial Switch will be operationalized. This will facilitate the integration of automated teller machines, ATMs, point-of-sale terminals, mobile and internet banking transactions between participants. The project is being implemented in 2 phases. The first phase will facilitate the settlement and clearance of automated teller machines and point-of-sale transactions, and is expected to go live by the end of this year. The second phase will cover mobile payments and is expected to go live in 2019. So, to promote the secondary market for government securities, increase liquidity, and enhance price discovery in the government bond market, the Bank of Zambia will introduce a primary dealership system in 2019. This will create a more vibrant wholesale and retail market for government securities. Government has further stepped up its sensitization efforts to retail customers to expand the investor base. Insurance. Mr. Speaker, Section 120 of the Insurance Act expressly prohibits the placement of Zambian business with companies not licensed in Zambia, except under certain circumstances. This provision must be enforced to grow the insurance industry in Zambia. I'm therefore directing the Pensions and Insurance Authority to work with the relevant stakeholders to ensure that this part of the law is implemented. I also appeal to all importers to ensure their assets in transit with local insurers. Decentralization. So, in line with the Constitution Amendment Act No. 2 of 2016, government is devolving a number of functions to the local authorities. Mr. Speaker, to support the devolution process, government has commenced the transfer of staff performing some functions from affected line ministries to local authorities through the implementation of the Human Resource Management Reform Program. In 2018, implementation of this program commenced in Chibombo District in Central Province, with a rollout to other districts expected to continue in 2019. So, in line with the principle of finance follows function, government will utilize the existing deconcentrated structures to channel financial resources to the district as an interim measure to devolution. Further, to strengthen the revenue base and collection efficiencies for local authorities, government will review the relevant legislation such as the Rating Act, which allow for mass valuation of properties. Business regulatory reforms. Mr. Speaker, to reduce the cost of doing business and facilitate efficient business-friendly registration and licensing services, government in 2018 established 2 regulatory service centers in Kitwe and Chipata. This brings the total number of regulatory service centers to 4. Labor law reforms, sir. A motivated worker is a productive worker. In recognition of this, government is undertaking labor law reforms to strengthen the protection of rights of workers. Government has made progress in the harmonization of various labor laws by consolidating the Employment Act, the Employment of Young Persons and Children Act, and the Minimum Wages and Conditions of Service Act into a single code. In addition, government is amending the Labour and Industrial Relations Act aimed at enhancing industrial relations. The 2 pieces of legislation will be brought to this House for consideration in 2019. Mr. Speaker, government attaches importance to improving productivity in the economy. To this end, government commenced the development of the National Productivity Policy, which will be finalized in 2019. The overall objective of the policy is to promote productivity in the country so as to enhance competitiveness, accelerate economic growth, and improve the living standards of our people. Public investment management reforms. Sir, government has made progress in the establishment of a comprehensive system of the appraisal of projects in order to ensure value for money. Business processes and an institutional framework are being elaborated. In 2019, a multi-sectorial public investment board will be established to scrutinize investment proposals prior to inclusion in the budget. To this end, all major projects will be required to undergo comprehensive appraisal through this system. Census of population and housing. Mr. Speaker, government will in August 2020 undertake the census of population and housing to account all the people living in Zambia, their distribution, living conditions, and other key data that are critical for development. I'm happy to report that preparations towards the census of population and housing commenced in 2017. The census office has been established and preparation of maps for enumeration areas is underway. So, the 2020 census will utilize an electronic data collection method that is expected to improve data quality and reduce the time lag between data collation and analysis. The pre-testing of the census data collection instruments will be conducted later this year and in 2019. Rebasing of the gross domestic product. Mr. Speaker, in 2019, government will undertake an exercise to rebase the gross domestic product, an exercise last conducted in 2012. The rebasing of the GDP will provide reliable and updated information on the current size and structure of the national economy. The rebasing will also provide government with an opportunity to update and develop appropriate social and economic indicators to measure progress in achieving objectives under the national development plans and sustainable development goals. State-owned enterprises. So, through the Industrial Development Corporation, government has been restructuring state-owned enterprises to make them competitive, viable, and contribute to national development. In this regard, the Zambia State Insurance Corporation Life Limited has been successfully restructured, whilst ZESCO Limited, Zamtel Limited, Zambia Daily Mail, and Times of Zambia will be restructured in 2019. Further, government will divest some of its shares to the private sector. Strategic equity partners will be invited into Indeni Petroleum Refinery Limited and Zambia State Insurance Corporation General Limited, whilst Zambia State Insurance Corporation Life Limited, the Zambia Forestry and Forest Industry Corporation, ZAFICO, will be listed on the Lusaka Securities Exchange in 2019. Part 3, Mr. Speaker, the 2019 budget. Mr. Speaker, the 2019 budget has been formulated against the backdrop of the austerity measures being implemented by government to deliver fiscal consolidation. It provides a firm foundation for us to return to moderate debt levels, entrench overall macro stability, and promote sustained and inclusive growth. So, the 2019 budget proposes bold and substantial changes in revenue mobilization and spending strategies in support of our goal for fiscal consolidation. The proposed measures will ensure that domestic revenue as a proportion of GDP increases to 18.7% from 17.7% in 2018. On the expenditure side, government will rationalize current expenditures within the context of the announced austerity measures. Mr. Speaker, the 2019 budget aims to achieve a fiscal deficit of no more than 6.5% of GDP, no more than 6.5% of GDP, from the projected 7.4% in 2018. Sir, I now provide the details of the 2019 budget. Mr. Speaker, government proposes to spend 86.8 billion or 28.9% of GDP in 2019. I'm not hearing question. I think they like that figure, Mr. Speaker. Government proposes to spend 86.8 billion of 28.9% of GDP in 2019. Expenditure allocations by function of government. Sir, expenditure allocations are now present, are aligned to the sector policies that I outlined in part 2 of my address. I will begin by providing details of how resources have been allocated across the broad functions of government. General public services, Mr. Speaker, I have allocated a total of 31.3 billion of general public services. Of this amount, the largest component is 23.6 billion for debt obligations, of which 14.2 billion is towards interest payments, and the balance, 9.4 billion, is for principal loan repayments. All these figures are in Kwacha, Mr. Speaker. Sir, to support the service delivery by local authorities, I have allocated a total of 1.2 billion to the Local Government Equalization Fund. This allocation is in addition to the revenues that local authorities collect in their respective jurisdictions. Further, I have allocated 249.6 million to the Constituency Development Fund. Mr. Speaker, I have allocated 1.2 billion to the Local Government Equalization Fund. This allocation is in addition to the revenues that local authorities collect in their respective jurisdictions. Further, I have allocated 249.6 million to the Constituency Development Fund. Mr. Speaker, the other notable allocations include 200 million to the Compensation Fund for payments arising from court cases ruled against the government, and 100.6 million for the contingency vote for unforeseen and unavoidable expenditures. Economic affairs, sir. In order to support government's agenda for economic diversification and job creation, I have allocated a total of 20.7 billion towards economic affairs function, compared with 17.3 billion in 2018. Honourable members will agree with me that without consistent investment in our economic sectors, it will not be possible to achieve sustainable and inclusive growth that can significantly help to reduce the developmental inequalities, poverty, and vulnerabilities that continue to affect our people. Mr. Speaker, I have allocated a total of 6.5 billion to the road infrastructure. This will cater for, amongst others, the continuation of Link Zambia 8000 project, the rehabilitation and upgrading of feeder roads across the country through the Rural Road Connectivity Program. Sir, agriculture remains a key priority area for job creation and economic diversification. In 2019, government intends to spend a total of 5.4 billion in the agriculture sector, including fisheries and livestock. Mr. Speaker, to support our small-scale farmers, I have allocated 1.4 billion to the Farmer Input Support Program. I have also allocated 672 million to the Food Reserve Agency for the maintenance of National Food Reserve. Sir, a further 2.1 billion has been allocated towards other agriculture, fisheries, and livestock development programs across the country. This includes 403.2 million earmarked for the Zambia Small Ruminants Value Chain Support Project, 585.7 million for irrigation development, which will include upscaling of small-scale irrigation projects. Other allocations are 277.9 million for the cashew nut infrastructure development project, 169.2 million for the Zambia aquaculture entrepreneurship project. These interventions will make significant inroads towards making our diversification agenda a reality. Mr. Speaker, in the energy sector, government will focus on promoting alternative energy sources, accelerating sector reforms, and connecting rural households to the national grid through the Rural Electrification Program. In this regard, I have allocated 415.8 million for various energy power infrastructure, and a further 182.5 million is earmarked for rural electrification. Education and skills development. Sir, recognizing the importance of education and skills training in national development, I propose to spend 13.3 billion in 2019, or 15.3% of the budget on this function. Within this amount, I have allocated 601.0. They haven't understood. I propose to spend, Mr. Speaker, 13.3 billion in 2019, or 15.3% of the budget on this function, this education and skills development. Within this amount, I've allocated 601.6 million for university and college infrastructure, whilst 258.8 million is for the completion and rehabilitation of school infrastructure across the country. Mr. Speaker, under skills development, I have allocated 164 million to support government's action in collaboration with the private sector in building a cadre of qualified personnel in artisan skills that are relevant to the needs of the industry. The health sector, sir, I've allocated a total of 8.1 billion, or 9.3% of the budget, to support health service delivery systems across the country, in order to ensure good supplies of medicines in health centers and hospitals. I have allocated 900.1 million. I have also allocated 32.8 million for community health services in order to redress the imbalance between curative and preventive health care. Further, Mr. Speaker, 620.2 million has been allocated towards the various infrastructure development projects that are currently underway in the sector. Mr. Speaker, I've allocated 10.7 million towards operationalization of the newly introduced National Health Insurance Scheme. Public order and safety. Sir, public order and safety plays a significant role in safeguarding strategic installations, economic investment, and maintaining peace within the country. In this regard, I have allocated 2.9 billion towards public order safety. Mr. Speaker, government is cognizant of the compelling imperative to improve the welfare of inmates in correctional facilities. Accordingly, I have allocated 7.6 million kwacha for the ongoing construction and rehabilitation of correctional facilities. I have also allocated 46.4 million for food rations to supplement the food grown by correctional facilities. Sir, to ensure access to justice for all, I have allocated 515.7 million for the operations of our courts across the country. Housing and community amenities. Sir Speaker, as part of this government's commitment to improve the provision of potable water, adequate sanitation, and decent housing, I have allocated 2.2 billion towards housing and community amenities. Of this amount, 1.98 billion is for the water supply and sanitation program. Some of the notable projects under this program include the Kafulafuta Water Supply Scheme Project, the Nkana Water Supply and Sanitation Project, and the Kafue Bao Water Supply and Sanitation. Social protection. Sir, government remains committed to reducing poverty and vulnerability amongst the economically disadvantaged society. In this regard, I have allocated 2.2 billion towards social protection. As a demonstration of government's commitment towards clearing pension arrears, 1.1 billion of this amount will go towards payment of retirement benefits to former public service workers under the Public Service Pensions Fund. Further, I've increased the government's contribution to the social cash transfer from 550 million in 2018 to 699.5 million in 2019. I have also allocated 110 million as grants for other social welfare programs, such as the Food Security Pack and the Public Welfare Assistance Scheme. Other functions, Mr. Speaker, I've made further allocations of 6.2 billion for the functions of defense, environmental protection, recreation, culture, and religion. Revenue estimates and measures, Mr. Speaker. Sir, to support the expenditure measures that I've outlined, total resources for 2019 are projected at 86.8 billion. Of this amount, domestic revenues account for 64.6%, whilst 2.2% is support from cooperating partners. The balance, 33.2%, is financing from domestic and foreign sources. So the breakdown of the resources is as follows. Total revenue, 86.8 billion. First part is from domestic revenues, which is 56.1 billion. Of that, tax revenues will be 47 billion, with income tax taking 23.3 billion, value-added tax taking 14.9 billion, customs and excise taking 8.4 billion, and other revenues at 0.4 billion. Non-tax revenue is at 9.1 billion. Grants are 1.9 billion. And financing, domestic financing, 4.2 billion, foreign financing, 24.6 billion, total financing, 28.8 billion. Total resources, 86.8 billion. Mr. Speaker, let me now discuss the details of the revenue measures I'm proposing for 2019. Direct taxes. Sir, base erosion and profit shifting through aggressive tax planning is detrimental to enhanced domestic mobilization. I propose to introduce a new method of computing the amount of interest to be allowed when computing profits of a business. Under this method, interest allowable for deduction will be limited to 30% of earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, and amortization, commonly called EBITDA. This measure will exclude businesses on the turnover tax system and those registered under the Banking and Financial Services Act and the Insurance Act. Mr. Speaker, the government is committed to preventing the abuse of transfer prices by associated enterprise. However, transfer pricing cases normally take longer to conclude due to their complexity. I therefore propose to remove the limitation requirement to retain records for up to 6 years in respect of documents for transfer pricing purposes and allow for assessments to be made beyond the period of 6 years, but not beyond 10 years. Further, I propose to increase the penalty for non-compliance with transfer pricing regulations to 80 million penalty units from 10,000 penalty units. Sir, I propose to increase the withholding tax rate on dividends, interest, and branch profit remittance to 20% from 15%. This measure is intended to harmonize at 20% the withholding tax rate for all payments in the form of cross-border dividends, interest payments, branch profit remittances, royalties, and commissions payable to non-residents. Mr. Speaker, in order to encourage local value addition and employment creation in the copper subsector, I propose to reduce the company income tax rate to 15% from 35% for companies that add value to copper cathode. Sir, I have received numerous submissions that the current turnover tax system is complex and regressive. I have carefully listened to the taxpayers' concerns. I therefore propose to abolish the current turnover tax regime and reintroduce a flat rate of 4% on business turnover below 800,000 per annum. This is in order to make taxation of small and medium enterprises simpler and thereby encourage compliance. Mr. Speaker, I propose to abolish the 20% casino levy and introduce a new tax regime on casinos, lottery, betting, and gaming to allow for better regulation of the industry as follows. Casino live games, 20% of gross takings. 2. Casino machine games at 35% of gross takings. Lottery winnings at 35% of net proceeds. Betting at 10% of gross stakes. And gaming at 250 to 500 kwacha per machine per month. Sir, to ensure that effective implementation of this measure, I propose to appoint the Zambia Revenue Authority as an interim regulator for the gaming and betting industry. Mr. Speaker, in order to enhance revenue collection under the turnover tax system, I propose to provide for the appointment of tax agents by the Commissioner General to withhold turnover tax at the source of payment for goods and services supplied. Customs and excise duty. Sir, I propose to introduce an excise duty of 30 ngwe per litre on non-alcoholic beverages. The government will take appropriate fiscal measures to protect local manufacturing of non-alcoholic beverages from unfair competition whilst discouraging import dependence. Mr. Speaker, solar energy equipment and requisite batteries are exempt from customs duty. To promote and ensure affordable access to off-grid efficiency energy solutions, I propose to suspend customs duty on LED lights. Sir, to encourage value addition and further investment in the leather industry, I propose to lift the ban on exports of raw hides and skin and introduce an export duty of 10% on these items. Mr. Speaker, to discourage the use of plastic carrier bags and curtail further negative impact on the environment, I propose to increase excise duty on plastic carrier bags to 30% from 20%. Sir, I propose to have a glass of water. Sir, I propose to increase the customs duty on used and retreaded tires from 25% or 3 kwacha per kg to 40% or 5 kwacha per kg. The measure is intended to reduce the use of used tires that are in most cases the cause of our road traffic accidents and result in loss of lives. Mr. Speaker, I propose to increase the customs duty on powdered milk to 15% from 5%. This measure is intended to curtail misclassification. Sir, the tax concessions are a cost to government. I have therefore decided to increase the period of absence from Zambia required for a returning resident to qualify for a rebate on duty payable on motor vehicle per household from 2 years to 4 years. Stringent measures to scrutinize the eligibility of beneficiaries will be put in place. Mr. Speaker, to further rationalize incentives, I propose to remove customs duty rebates on the construction of shopping malls. Changes to the mining tax regime. Sir, our nation is endowed with vast mineral resources which transcend beyond copper and cobalt. As mineral resources are a depleting resource, it is vital to structure an effective fiscal regime for the mining sector to ensure that Zambians benefit from the mineral wealth our country is blessed with. In this regard, I propose the following measures. 1. To increase the mineral royalty tax rate by 1.5 percentage points at all levels of the sliding scale. 2. Introduce a 4th tier rate at 10% on a sliding scale of mineral royalty regime, which would apply when the copper price rises beyond $7,500 per metric ton. 3. I intend to make mineral royalty tax a non-deductible item for income tax purposes. 4. Introduce an import duty at the rate of 5% on copper and cobalt concentrate. 5. Introduce an export duty on precious metals, including gold, precious stones, and gemstones, at the rate of 15%. And 6. Lift the suspension of the export duty on manganese ores and concentrate, which was put in place in 2012, and increase this duty to 15% from 10%. Reintroduction of sales tax, Mr. Speaker. The need to enhance domestic revenue mobilization cannot be overemphasized. Government has therefore undertaken a review of the various taxes currently being implemented with a view to improve their contribution to minimize revenue leakages. To this end, government proposes to abolish the value-added tax and replace it with simpler, non-refundable sales tax. Sir, as we implement the new tax, the government, through the Zambia Revenue Authority, will finalize audits of all outstanding VAT refund claims and enforce all outstanding VAT assessments in order to collect any unpaid taxes. Government also remains committed to settling the verified VAT refund claims that have so far been accumulated. Mr. Speaker, after extensive consultation with all stakeholders, I will, at an appropriate time, bring to the House the necessary legislation to repeal the current VAT legislation. I therefore call upon all honourable members of this August House to support the bill to reintroduce sales tax. Housekeeping measures, sir. I propose to amend the Income Tax Act, the Mines and Minerals Development Act, Customs and Excise Act, Value Added Tax, Insurance Premium Levy Act, and the Tourism Levy Act to update, strengthen, and remove ambiguities in certain provisions of the tax laws in order to make tax administration more effective. The details of the proposed changes will be reflected in the respective legislation that I will later introduce in the House. Non-tax revenue measures, Mr. Speaker. I propose to adjust upwards the cost-reflective levels, various fees. Mr. Speaker, let me repeat. I propose to adjust upwards to cost-reflective levels, various fees that have not been revised for a long time for services provided by government departments. Sir, I further propose that from 2020 onwards, revision of fees and fines be indexed to inflation and adjusted every 2 years. Sir, all these measures I have outlined, with the exception of sales tax, will take place with effect from 1st of January 2019. Part 4, Mr. Speaker, let me conclude. I conclude my budget address this afternoon. I wish to echo the theme of His Excellency, Mr. Edgar Chagwa Lungu, President of the Republic of Zambia's address to this August House only 2 weeks ago. The President's clarion call was for all Zambians to commit themselves to working together to achieve Vision 2030. Sir, the Patriotic Front government is committed to delivering a prosperous Zambia for all by 2030, harnessing the ideas, energies, and talents of all Zambians. We all have a legitimate and rightful stake in this country, and we must all work together as a united people to make our Vision 2030 a reality. Mr. Speaker, our road to a prosperous Zambia for all is not without challenges. Government fully recognizes the challenges that lie before us. We must all work together to achieve higher and more inclusive growth. We must contain our debt within sustainable levels in order to reduce the burden of debt service. In this regard, we must progressively reduce our fiscal deficit, whilst ensuring that together we protect the most vulnerable in our society. Sir, the 2019 budget addresses these challenges head-on and continues to build on the solid foundation laid by the Patriotic Front government over the last 7 years. Delivering fiscal consolidation will require extraordinary measures which need to be supported by a united people. I have no doubt about our capacity as a people to work together, to take the resolute actions and make courageous decisions required to meet these challenges. Even as we resolve these challenges, we shall not sink so low as to sell our strategic assets to foreign interests. We shall work in the best interests of our people to transform our Vision 2030 into reality. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move.
The question is that the House do now resolve into Committee of Supply on the estimates of revenue and expenditure for the year 1st January 2019 to 31st December 2019, presented to the National Assembly in September 2018. Any further debate? The Honourable Member for Kaumbwe.
Mr. Speaker, I thank you for giving me this opportunity to be the first to debate the motion of supply that has just been moved by the Honorable Minister of Finance on the national budget for 2019. Sir, firstly, allow me to congratulate the Honorable Minister of Finance for the manner in which she has presented the 2019 national budget. Mr. Speaker, the speech has covered a number of important issues that border on the economy of our country and therefore requires digesting on the and carefree analysis by all honorable members. It is therefore important that we defer the debate on this motion to Tuesday, 2nd October 2018, in order to avail ample time to honorable members to study the budget speech in detail. This way, honorable members will be able to come back and debate the important issues in the speech more meaningfully and constructively. With these few words, I wish to propose that the debate on the motion by the Honorable Minister of Finance be deferred to Tuesday, 2nd of October 2018. Mr. Speaker, I thank you.
Any further debate, Honorable Member for Kantanshi?
Mr. Speaker, I thank you for according me this opportunity to support the proposal by the Honorable Member for Kaumbwe Parliamentary Constituency that the debate on the motion of supply moved by the Honorable Minister of Finance be deferred to Tuesday, 2nd October 2018. Honorable members who agree with me that the issues contained in the budget have an impact on the life of every Zambian citizen. Sir, for this reason, it is important that more time is given to honorable members to carefully study and analyze the budget speech which has just been presented so that we can engage in meaningful debate on the issues contained in the speech. In this regard, I wish to support the proposal to adjourn the debate on the motion to Tuesday next week. Mr. Speaker, I thank you.
I hear no objection to the proposal. The proposal is agreed to. The debate on the motion is adjourned until Tuesday, 2nd October 2018. The acting leader of government business.
Sir, I beg to move that the House do not adjourn.
The question is that the House do now adjourn any debate Any objection? The question is agreed to. The House? Is now adjourned.
The House has adjourned as suggested to Tuesday, 2nd October, to give more time to members of Parliament to just go through the details that the Minister of Finance has presented in her proposed budget. It's been it's as an 86.6 billion kwacha expenditure budget that she is proposing. She has outlined key policy measures as well as suggested legal reforms to ensure that this 86.6 billion kwacha is realized. We are still at Parliament grounds, and we've had the privilege and honor of hosting Dr. Bona Chita, a lecturer at the Department of Economics at University of Zambia, so that he can just go through the details. As we always say, that the devil is in the details.
Is in the details.
I know it's quite soon for you to really sink your teeth into the nitty-gritties of this 35-page document, but at face value, Doc, what's your impression?
Thanks, Inutu. It's been a very interesting budget, as usual. We spent the very early part of the afternoon debating and speculating what we would like to see. Now we've seen what it is and tried to reconcile with our earlier discussions and speculations. On face value, as you said, this is very preliminary, but there are some positive things. The programmatic aspects of the budget, for instance, and the intention, the policy expressions around the reforms and those things are quite good. However, on the more substantive issues which we raise, such as the financing, the revenue generation and the expenditure sides of the budget, essentially the fiscal policy aspect, and its implications, actually, we can extend this now to even the monetary policy issues, the role of the Bank of Zambia and what it has. It would be nice to see these triangulating the expenditure revenue aspects of the budget and the goal to try and maintain stable money supply and low interest rates by the Bank of Zambia in order to foster investment. So the question becomes, has the budget succeeded, or to what extent is it succeeding to try and reconcile these twin objectives by the government? And what we see is, firstly, reductions in allocations. The allocation and stabilization functions of the budget are not quite what we hoped for or what I was expecting to see. We've had the social sectors, such as education and health, having their allocations cut. Medicines has been drastically, almost 20% reduction on the medicines, the drugs and medical supplies. That's a huge cut. We have social sectors, again, such as water and sanitation has gone up. Good thing in the light of what we're saying about cholera. So we are glad to see that.
Can I just cut you just for a minute, because you need to hold your thoughts there. I'm just seeing that honourable members of Parliament are trooping out of Parliament, and our colleagues are trying to get interviews in terms of reactions to immediate reactions to the sector resource allocation. I see that Chitalu is ready somewhere there with just interviewing,
yes,
as well
right.
as Minister of Fisheries and Livestock there is also waiting. So let's just get to hear the immediate reactions, and then we'll come back to you.
Right, thank you so much, Inutu. Just now I am joined by Energy Minister Mathinkua. I'll just get a quick reaction from you, Minister. Your impressions of the just unveiled budget?
Yeah, I think the just unveiled budget is a good budget. I mean, I think that the cloth has been cut according to the size that it is. So it has been well thought of budget, and I'm particularly happy with my ministry, because I've been allocated money for rural electrification, and it is in line with the president's speech, that we need to introduce more power to people so that we can move from the 31% and the 4.5% electricity in rural areas and urban areas, so that the people can start enjoying electricity, and then we can, bring up development. Because as you know, electricity is the engine room of the country. I always say it's the engine room of the country because that's where the development is. Energy is power, so we power everything in means of cooking, travel, and everything. It's energy. So I'm happy that my ministry has been very well taken.
The talk of increase of supply of electricity has been going on for some time. So obviously with this development, we see you kicking into Gear 5 come 2019?
Yes, thank you very much. I mean, when the talk is there and the money is allocated, then you can cook. But if you are asked to bake a cake and you don't have the ingredients, then it can't happen. But I've been given the ingredients by Honorable Mwanakatwe, so now I'll be able to bake the cake.
Right. Minister, I'd like to wish you all the very best.
Thank you very much. All the best.
Thank you. Enotu?
Thank you very much, Talu. But we see that you have quite a good response from the honourable members of Parliament, and we will just let you have an interview with the Minister of Livestock and Fisheries so that you can just have an immediate reaction to the allocations that have been planned and proposed in this year's budget. Talu?
Oh, you do?
Yes.
Right, just now I'm joined by Fisheries and Livestock Minister Kampamba Mlenga. Minister, your quick description of the budget that has just been delivered.
Very well presented budget, and I will say for our sector, agriculture, fisheries and livestock, we've been allocated 5.4 billion, which is very adequate. And one other aspect that I would want to outline is that our sector, agriculture, fisheries and livestock, is a priority sector for job creation and also for economic diversification. I would just want to draw your attention to, for the first time, I think after a very long time, the small ruminants under my sector have actually been recognized. And this is very important for our sector, especially at a time when we have, the export of goats to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And also aquaculture has also been identified as an economic driver in my sector. So as Minister in charge of Fisheries and Livestock, I must say I'm very, very happy, and we will do our best as a ministry to ensure that the monies that have been allocated to my sector are placed in good use.
We do know, Minister, that with regards to fisheries and livestock, there has been a lot of emphasis on the part of government to grow this particular sector. So obviously, going forward, we see increased pace, as you have said, and increased results, I assume.
Definitely, we are actually going to begin our construction of the aquaculture parks in the 5 provinces, which will obviously boost the sector, scale up in terms of production and productivity. And we also just did the inspection of our fish cages, which we'll put on Kariba, Tanganyika, Mweru, in the various provinces. So for us, we are on course. We just do hope that the money that has been allocated to this sector, especially aquaculture, and the President's emphasis has to grow this sector. He has come on board to actually demonstrate that, look, this is the way to go. It's just not about the money aspect and growing the sector. It will also reduce poverty in the rural parts of our country, and also we look at the other aspect of nutrition. As you're aware, fish, obviously, we as a sector produce 48% of the protein that goes to the tables of our Zambians. So we do hope that we're going to scale up, and we're on course. We are obviously underway to obviously give out pens, even as far as Western Province, Northern Province in Muchinga. So we are going to be dotted all over to ensure that as many of our people, the Zambian people, the well-deserving Zambian people, are acquainted to aquaculture, fish farming.
All the best, Minister.
Thank you very much.
Right, I hand you back to Inetu.
Well, thank you very much, Chitalu. And Doc, as we wait for the next person that Chitalu will be interviewing, we can just quickly, just comment on the minister's reaction there. She seems to be happy with the 5 billion allocated to the Ministry of Livestock and Fisheries.
Yeah, something else, there's the agriculture added to that,
Yeah.
but she certainly was happy. I was glad to see that.
Yeah.
And she seems to have, to be focused on development of the fish industry.
That's very rare, because I just thought that, somebody
Yeah.
would say, I need more money for my sector, but to hear that she's happy.
She's happy and promising to boost production. As you know, we're in deficit where fish is concerned. And
Absolutely.
again, it's one of those resources we're talking about. Zambia should not have deficit of fish. It should have a surplus,
Absolutely.
feeding the region.
Well,
So, yeah.
Chitalu seems to have managed to get hold of the Minister of Labour and Social Security, and we did hear the Honourable Minister of Finance indicating that there should be some reforms there in terms of ensuring that all legislation is in a single code. Chitalu, pick it up.
Labour Minister Joyce Nonde joins me now. Minister, very quickly, your impression of the just unveiled budget.
Okay, I can say that, as you know, we are all part of the budget as a cabinet, and a lot of things were debated, and we agreed on what has been presented. On Labour, Minister of Labour, I think you heard that our main concern is to ensure that all legislation regarding social security is put in one code, Labour Code. So we will be very busy. We have done a lot of groundwork, and we have been included in the budget that we conclude the Labour Code this year. So I'm very happy that we have been included in the budget. And also the issues of inspection. We need about 1,000 inspectors for us to cover the whole country, but we only have 50. So the budget is saying we should be supported so that we have as many inspectors as possible, so that we can touch all the corners of Zambia where there is the economic activity, where the workers are employed, so that we can make sure that they are well looked after by their employers. As it is now, it has been very, very difficult. As I said, 50 out of 1,000. We need 1,000 and we have only 50. It hasn't been easy. So the Minister of Labour has been adequately featured in the budget, and it will be up to us to work hard. I know a budget is a guide. There are times when you budget but things don't work, even at home level. But however, you know that we are trying to rebuild our country, and a lot of things have to be done. It won't be easy. We will be talking to our social partners to discuss the budget further and to understand where we are and why certain issues have been changed or have been increased and so on and so forth. But otherwise, the budget is encouraging growth, and all workers, I expect all the workers and employers to support it.
Minister, I'd like to thank you so much, and I wish you all the very best.
Thank you and good luck.
Enoto?
Doc, Labour seems to be very happy, and I just took notice that she's saying that they had a deficit of almost 950 Labour inspectors. She hopes that the budgetary allocation now will cover for Labour inspectors to reach the established 1,000. A worry for many people, shouldn't that be?
An absolute worry for maybe even some of us. No, I mean, we know what's going on with Labour, the low end of the Labour, the semi-skilled and unskilled, and the not exactly abuses, but the exploitation, shall we say, that's going on there. So perhaps, yes, there's need to, not looking at minimum wages, but to have humane conditions of service. That's the most important. And if there are no inspectors to go around, I think that has been one of our concerns. So yeah, Labour is in need of some reforms. So yeah, that's
the
a
right path, the right way to go.
Right way to go.
Right.
Start.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Chitalu will soon be speaking to the provincial minister for Southern Province. Chitalu.
Southern Province Minister Edify Hamukale joins us now. Minister, your thoughts regarding the budget?
Thank you very much. The budget is a very impressive one, well thought through, and which was heavily full of consultation. The budget has a heavier thrust on investment spending as opposed to consumption spending. We see that most of the monies have gone to sectors that will stimulate growth, and that growth will answer back to social inequalities that include unemployment, poverty, illiteracy, and also to arrest the urban-rural drift and the other way around. Looking at agriculture, the Maputo Protocol requires that all member countries invest or commit around 10% of their national budgets to agriculture. But I think this budget has exceeded that expectation because we are around 11%. When you add livestock together with agriculture, we're around 11% of the national budget. And then secondly, we see huge investment in the area of infrastructure, in the area of tourism, and these are sectors, economic sectors, that answer back to the 7th National Development Plan, creating employment, reducing poverty, and ensuring that all the inequalities are minimized as much as possible, bringing everyone on board. And the other excellent component is that the social services sector will be stimulated. We even have much higher targets to reach out to the vulnerables in society. And then also, we see that the rural communities haven't been forgotten. So it caters for both urban and rural. And looking into the future, we see that this is a budget that will answer back also to the need of Zambia to industrialize, to manufacture. And recently the president received an award on industrialization by the UN. That shows that Zambia is way ahead of its peers in Africa in as far as industrialization is concerned. So we are extremely happy, and those of us in the provinces see an exciting year ahead of us to implement this budget.
Right. Thank you so much, Minister. Well, the debates continue from here on, and just now we continue giving you a few reactions, but just now I hand you back to Inutu.
Doc, very interesting observations coming through from the provincial minister there, Edify Hamkale. He seems to think that at face value this budget is actually skewed towards industrialization and hopes to create job employment opportunities for the unemployed youths.
Yes, and he mentioned investment, and this is where I think maybe I take as a digression because looking at the budget, we see that the debt servicing is still there as high as not as perhaps high as we expected, but pretty high. Now the more worrying thing is that the loan portfolio is projected to increase, and that is a worry because this is precisely what is going to drive resources away from possible investment, make the environment a little bit unfriendly for investment. As I was saying earlier, by pushing up the interest rates, the exchange rate is already depreciating, and very uncomfortably so, and this is going to have an added ripple effect as well. And given those scenarios, it's hard to see where the investment will come from.
I hear you, Doc. Just now we cross over to where Chitalu is, and it's interesting that I think I can identify that she's about to interview the president of Zika, who had earlier said what he expected and what he wanted were two different things. I hope now he's happy with what he wanted. Maybe some of what he wanted is in the budget. Chitalu?
We continue to get reactions from different stakeholders, and just now joining me is Mr. Jason Kazilimani. He is President Zika, as well as Senior Partner KPMG. Now, Mr. Kazilimani, earlier on you did speak about your expectations. Has what has come out of the budget sitting well with what you expected?
In some respects, yes, but I must say there are quite a number of shocks, quite a number of surprises. There are quite a few good things. For example, the bringing of solar equipment duty-free, the raising of duty on plastic, which I think is very good for the environment because we want to reduce use of plastic. There are a number of surprises. I think one of the biggest surprises is the scrapping of the VAT regime. That's a big, big game changer.
Didn't expect that at all.
No, and I don't think a lot of people expected that, because when you looked at the the green paper issued after the medium-term expenditure framework, what was noted there was that the minister wanted to increase VAT, revenue from VAT, as a proportion of GDP. So obviously, a lot of people probably expected an increase in the VAT amount, but that hasn't happened. What's going to happen, what she's proposing to do, is actually scrap VAT and reintroduce sales tax. Now, the implication of sales tax is that companies will not be able to have any credit, unlike VAT, where you offset your output VAT against your input VAT, and that's got a good cash flow impact. With sales tax, and it's not very clear how it's going to be implemented and what the mechanism will be, but it is likely to be a major game changer. There are a few other surprises as well, but I suppose these were expected. I think the increase in the mineral royalty tax by 1.5 percentage points across the various levels, and then introducing a sliding scale, 10% tax whenever the price of copper goes above, I think she said $5,000 per ton. And also mineral royalty tax, she's proposing that it's no longer deductible. So this will actually increase taxes that mining companies will pay. Another major change is the limit on the amount of interest that will be allowable for tax purposes. If you're not a bank or an insurance company, I think you can only limit the amount of interest that you can claim back in your tax computation of something like 30% of your earnings before interest, tax, and depreciation. So that's a major change. Okay, so those were a few surprises. I was making some notes. It's quite a lot of changes, quite a lot to digest. One good thing, though, is I think the reduction to 15% from 35% tax for companies that add value to copper cathodes. So this should actually encourage companies that are into value addition where copper is concerned to actually increase production, because or come into play, because they'll actually be paying a reduced tax. 35% from 35 to 45 is a major difference, and I think that's meant to encourage companies to go into adding value to copper products.
I do know that later this evening, you do have a post-budget analysis dinner, and I like to believe a number of issues will come out from there as you continue to debate the just unveiled budget.
Yeah, that's true. We've got a dinner scheduled to start around 18:30, and we expect the Minister of Finance, who just presented the budget, to be there together with her team. We've got a panel being held in conjunction with the Economics Association of Zambia, between Zika and the Economics Association. It's going to be a high-powered panel. And since there are so many changes that have been announced, I think it sets the base for a very robust discussion. There will definitely not be a dull moment tonight.
Right. I'd like to thank you so very much. I do know that, the debate will be ongoing for quite a while as people begin to absorb this budget.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Inetu?
Thank you very much, Talu. The debate is indeed going to be ongoing for quite some time as we unravel the details in this year's presentation of the budget. I note that he's quite excited about the fact that there seems to be some exemption in the solar equipment and panels and lights as well. Yes,
that's right. Yeah.
So that should spur some development, some growth.
Yeah, and also he mentioned this reduction in the corporate income tax for anyway, there's some allowance that there's a reduction from 35% to 15%, as he mentioned, and he did allude to that. There are some positive things which should provide incentives and try to spur higher productivity. That is certainly the case, yes. But then there's also the tax issue. In general, he mentioned VAT is going to be scrapped within the next few weeks as the minister comes back to Parliament for the formal budget adoption process.
I listened to that, Doc, and I was just as we were listening to her budget presentation, and she mentioned that and proposed that instead she wants to propose sales tax.
Sales tax,
I was going to say, isn't this one and the same thing? But let's cross over to Chitalu because she seems to have...
she's ready.
Yeah, she's ready with the next guest for reactions. Chitalu.
And I'll speak with Dr. Lubinda Habazoka from the Economics Association of Zambia. Doc, your quick reaction with regards to the just unveiled budget?
Well, I think that the budget reflects the economic conditions both globally and domestically. I think as an association we are still studying the budget, but I think we are very happy that government finally has made a bold decision to close leakages in terms of revenue generation. I think there's going to be a lot of debate over the abolishment of VAT in favor of sales tax, but I think as an individual and mostly as a consensus among us, most members of EAZ, we have always preferred sales tax because of recent businesses have started treating VAT refunds as working capital, which basically is not the case in any developed and civilized economy. I think looking at that pattern, I think government is going to even get more money from this measure than they even anticipated, because there are a lot of businesses basically that run on VAT refunds, and it's very good that government has maintained pay as you earn, that is personal income tax. I think good measures have been introduced in other sectors in terms of economic diversification, more land to fall under irrigation. We have seen that government continues on the same path to provide citizens with food rich in high protein, and I'm talking about fish farming. And it's very good that the Honourable Minister mentioned measures that are going to expand that particular sector, and major projects across the country mentioned. When you look at the health sector, government intends to upgrade teaching hospitals, continuing to build health posts. In the agriculture sector, we have seen that government's approach of a dual system vocation and education path is going to be enhanced. I think overall, if you want to pick the positives, I think there are a lot of issues to pick from. Of course, harsh times call for harsh measures, and turnover tax increase here and there. I think businesses might complain. Measures that have been put in place to encourage production of non-alcoholic beverages in the country. That is very good, because you and me now can move in and do that. You expect a new tax, I think, on your pay slip. That is the health tax. To fund universal access to energy, to health services in line with Vision 2030. So those are the measures that I have picked out, and I think I can mention as for now.
Right. Well, of course, it's like you say, it's too soon to really begin to dissect it bit by bit. But as we go on, there'll be lots of debates around the budget, and we will look forward to engaging various stakeholders, yourselves, on what the way forward is.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for government's mine tax policy. I think that's the most sane mine tax regime we have ever seen in a long time.
Well, Doc, I'd like to thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Inatu?
Lubinda Habazoka there, speaking as an Economic Association of Zambia president, making something that actually commenting on something that I wanted to ask you later on, to say that it seems there's relief coming from the mining tax regime. The minister proposed an increase of, I think, by 1.5% in the taxation regime for mining in terms of mineral royalty tax.
Yeah, that seems to be the case. That
Go on, Doc, go on.
Okay.
Yes. That's live TV, go on.
Learning,
Yes.
and it's addictive. It's great. But the interesting bit about that, and I think we were partly discussing this when the speech was being read and trying to tease out where this is coming from, because the total revenue does not seem to reflect this increase. Yes, and we made mention of an interesting observation that revenue from fines and other such like sources is the same as revenue from the mines.
Yes.
You know, so
We did mention that, but just now, because it's almost getting dusk and it's almost getting to evening time now, we will just take a short break, and then we will kind of like wrap up with the expectations and now how the reality has panned out and what it means in the next coming few weeks as people digest, and the immediate things that we hope to see, we will be seeing on our payslips. I think not as immediate as people want to put it, because I think this budget is effective 1st January 2019. So now we just have still some time, some breathing time to breathe. We just break for a commercial from our sponsors.
One Zambia, one nation.
Whether you're laying down foundations for your business or restructuring market goals, it's important to have professionals that you can trust. Chartered accountants are key to business growth, to help you bring your ventures to the world. That's why you should make sure you have a CA Zambia on board. CA Zambia is a globally recognized chartered accountancy qualification that ensures our chartered accountants uphold international standards and stay informed on the best accounting practices worldwide. Keep your business growth healthy. Go with a CA Zambia certified accountant. CA Zambia, developing business leaders. Are you a talented student thinking of a career in accountancy? Do you desire to develop a successful and internationally recognized qualification? CA Zambia will help you achieve your career aspirations. Make the right choice and shape your career in business and finance. CA Zambia, not just an accountant, but a chartered accountant. CA Zambia, developing business leaders.
Well, the time seems to have just flown by, and it's unbelievable that we've been here from 12. We had so many speculations, and now the document has been delivered. It's in public domain. We have had a chance of seeing it and, teasing out one or two issues. And we're just honored and humbled that you could take time off your busy schedule. Once again, I need to thank you publicly. And I hope this won't be the last time that you're coming, but I'll just give you time to wrap up. Just holistically, what do you think about this budget?
It has its positives. We see that from the pillars that were being given out, there are attempts to try and get productivity going, the agriculture sector, the manufacturing sector, and also to try and get a grip of the resource mobilization a little bit, the presumptive taxes with the informal sector and the corporate world. So that's quite a well-intended, step in the right direction. Well-intended strategy and actions around the budget implementation. And we should not forget that this is only a one-year document, but we keep repeating that foundation matters. However, on the other hand, we had hoped to see a little bit more of consolidating related activities around trying to manage and restrict the growth of the debt, maintaining allocations so that we have the allocative functions that's meeting stabilization, and also the distributive aspects where we try to be fair in meeting the well-being, safety net, so to say, of the vulnerable. But if the taxes and as implied will be going up, then that's a cause for worry. And of course, we talked about how overall the increased debts, there's implied increased debt in the budget, and that's really a worry for the concerns raised around interest rate, exchange rate, budget deficits, the undercutting of allocations to ministry sectors, because that affects service delivery and performance by the state. So again, this is a preliminary observations, but they do raise some concerns and they do raise some positive aspects.
Doctor, thank you so much for your time. We will be calling on you and your expert analysis to come through to our mass media complex studios. Hopefully you will find time, and like you said, well, live TV is addictive, isn't it? We just have to get to a point where we say enough. We need to cross back to the studio and, you know, get our programming going. And obviously the news tonight will be a source of catch up for people who have missed this broadcast and other consequent programs. I do know that there's a post-analysis din, and I think ZNBC is covering, so people must just look out to watch the channel. Chitalu?
Oh, indeed, it's been an interesting day, interesting views that have come through, you know, beginning from expectation stage, and it's interesting to note for some of the stakeholders that, you know, the expectations and what actually came through, you know, slightly apart, but at the end of the day the budget has been delivered, and what's left is to move forward with it.
Well, on behalf of the entire production crew, hard-working technical crew that has been rigging here since yesterday, and they've delivered today on both channels, TV1 and TV2, and on behalf of Dr. Bona Chita from the University of Zambia Department of Economics, and on behalf of my colleague Chitalu Mulenga, thank you so much for your time. We take you back to the studio.
Thank you.
World over, business trends are changing. Business is being done digitally, and Zambia as a country does not need to lag behind.
It is business and enterprise. Join us this Thursday at 18:25 hours as we talk about value addition and the importance of buying local products. And also, we get to understand why you should join an association as an entrepreneur.
Because business comes from ideas.
And of course, an interesting business profile.
And whatever challenge you go through, there are challenges every single day. The most important thing is to just keep going.